For my what?
For your recorder.
I don't have a recorder. I tried to set it up on my phone and on my computer, and it wouldn't set up. So that's why when I wrote the consent form, it's specifically audio only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I should be able to set it right there.
Looks good?
Yeah, it's running.
Beautiful. So first off, did either of you have any questions about the consent form that you signed?
No. No.
Beautiful. So just to go over it on the recorder, I have exactly one question for you, but because I know that both of you talk for quite a while, I'm anticipating 30 to 45 minutes, probably per person. But more or less than that is absolutely okay. I'm not going to cut you off or expect you to go any longer. Second, we're obviously recording the audio. I will not be removing your names from the audio. I will not be removing your names from my report. Your names will be included in all of it, and it will be available online, and I'll make it available to you once it's posted online. And obviously, my faculty advisor, Dr. Schulist, is not here right now. It's just the three of us. Sounds good?
Yeah.
Beauty. All right. So I only prepared one question because I've met both of you before, and I kind of know how you answer things. So the only question I have is, when someone asks what you do for a living, why do you say what you do? So I know for you, you say contentious injured worker.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering why you chose that.
Excuse me, sorry.
No, that's fine.
You gave me a donut.
That's your honorarium.
The reason I call myself that is because back in the old days, and recently I should say, before I even begin, people have actually been verbally calling me an advocate now. And so originally I got injured at work. I never got any kind of assistance whatsoever. It actually impoverished myself and my family. I've even become homeless because of it. But it's further what we discovered at the time. And when we came forward with all this information, naively, we actually believed that the authorities that we were going to would actually listen to us and give us a fair and honest review of what we were talking about. Mm-hmm. And when I say naively, we went through all resources available within the province. And we found out the same results at all of them. And they're there to protect the government staff, service members, and the politicians, but they're most certainly not there to protect us in any way, shape, or form. And that's why we formed a small little group. There's only at present, there were others, but at present there's only 3 of us in the group. And in turn, we were injured.
And what group is that, sorry?
We just call ourselves our little crew.
Yeah.
It's myself, Ralph Teague, and Peter Samardzija. And we believe, beyond any doubt, that if we were ever given a fair and honest, independent and impartial investigation of any kind, we would be able to prove exactly why we could be injured at work. Regardless of the circumstances of the injury, we were injured at work, but yet we did not receive timely or accurate medical care. And we were forced to deal with a compensation system, and then of course a quasi-judicial process, which led to the police, which led to the courts. And at all different steps as we moved our way through it all, we always naively believed that if we can just get to the next level and to the next level and the next level, that we're going to find a fair and honest and independent impartial investigation to figure all this out, what happened to us. We have all this evidence to prove wrongdoing, but we have no place to go with it. And that's been a concern for many, many years. That's one issue. The other issue is, as with any condition whatsoever, any medical condition whatsoever, if you don't receive timely and accurate medical care, in time it's going to go chronic. And once it does, it can manifest into a number of different concerns. And these things just amplify. Because a lot of people, like myself, I start out with what we believe to be 2 injuries, and now I have 4 different rare conditions identified, and multiple other things that medically that were never diagnosed before. And see, as we move along through this process, and when I'm saying moving along too, I'm talking, I was blown up and burnt in a drilling rig explosion and fire in April of 1994. And as an easy example, it wasn't until 2016, even though I've had 11 MRIs, 6 CT scans, 5 bone scans, and hundreds of x-rays, it was never identified that I in turn have broken and crushed vertebrae in my back, and I always have had this problem. All the ligaments and tendons that go along the length of the spinal column are ripped apart, and all this time I've only had a small pieces of muscle. That's all that's left holding my upper body and my spinal column in place. And yet, for some strange reason, and this is a phenomena that we can't even understand yet to this day, is how could so many professionals look at the same thing and not realize? I mean, there is 12 thoracic vertebrae, and when you look at my x-rays and my film and count them, there's only 10. And how can nobody notice that for all of these years? And I have always felt that there's a commonality. You know, what would all of these people have in common? And what I feel is the answer is simply they were all asked to do something. And in this case, they were asked to, in fact, render an opinion on what they see. Now, the concern that I have, and the concern that others have, is who exactly asked them, and how was the questions asked. And it's because of this, and because of these discoveries, as to why we've decided that we're going to go to the police, and we're going to file a criminal complaint against all of these years of abuse that we've sustained at the hands of the Alberta government and all of these different entities herein. At one point in time, when we were actually thinking of filing, believe it or not, the 44-year dynasty of the PC Party of Alberta came to an end, and the NDP party got in, with Rachel Notley leading that said party. Now, we have, myself personally, I have personal connection to Rachel Notley, and only her and I and one other person are aware of what that connection is. It is severe enough in nature that I'm going to be presenting that material as well to the police to have them review, because even Premier Notley says that she's here to represent all Albertans. Many, many news broadcasts and film clips that you can get right now since she's become Premier will say that. She says that to everybody. I'm here to represent all Albertans, and so on and so forth. But in real life, in our lives, legally she can't. And we have the evidence to verify why she can't. And if she were ever to, she would come face to face with a multi-billion-dollar fund that will try to destroy her. It has been successful in taking anybody and everybody out, companies included. Do not stand a chance against a slush fund of this magnitude, right? Nobody can deal with that, and I don't believe she could withstand it either. But what she's doing is bold-faced lying. She can't help any injured worker in any way, shape, or form, and if she does ever, and it's even perceived that she did help us, then in turn, they can take legal action against her because of what she's done in the past. And I have taken the time to go to the Ethics Commissioner of Alberta, and I have asked for a formal investigation into what I'm about to say, or what I am discussing right now, and in turn, I have been proven to be correct. And I had a choice to make. I've let the Alberta Ethics Commissioner conduct their process and address it and any punishments or otherwise. But instead I've chosen to go to the police with the information, and I'm going to let them review it in the context of the fact that she had first-hand knowledge of what happened to us. She became a politician thereafter. She told me that if she could become a politician, she could help us. And everybody voted for her to get her in. And once she's got in, then we find the contract. And the contract is what led me to the Ethics Commissioner, and she can't help us. She's not legally allowed to assist us injured workers. And like I say, all of these things that we discovered, the withholding, editing, and destruction of files while people are going through the process, the fact that people can be in two places, legally be in two places in sworn affidavits at the very same time. This is why we're here. Ralph, for example, Ralph Teed, in turn, his file starts in 1985. and that's why his will be presented to the police first, and because he's the groundwork for our complaint. He became an injured worker, and he didn't receive timely and accurate medical care for 9 years, almost 9.5 years, before they actually acknowledged what was wrong with him. At that time they tried to do something, but they couldn't. It was too late. They only had so much time from date of injury to attempt to do, they have nerve root impingements. They try and slide a metal sleeve in before the joint space narrowing occurs and crushes the nerve. Because in modern medicine, no one knows what to do about a crushed nerve at all, except to medicate people and inject them with cortisone, steroids, and so on. But there's nothing, you can't touch that nerve. If you cut it, it kills the limb, whatever limb it's hooked up to. And then you'll end up having an amputation. So you can't just cut the thing to cut the pain. You have to figure out a way to address the pain. And this is how a person is being left by this abuse. And so, as I said before, we did honestly go to all the different entities, the Privacy Commissioner, Ombudsman, Human Rights Commission. There's no government entity within Alberta through the PC party that we're not aware of what happened to us. Specifically in my case, even the health minister of the day himself, whom we have documentation for to support what I'm just about to say, he's actually a lawyer. So there is no way in the world that he would not understand when I explained to him specifically at the time that we have evidence to prove that withholding, editing, and destruction of injured workers' files while we were going through the quasi-judicial and judicial processes and all the appealable processes of the board and the compensation board, and then through the judicial processes of the courts. And they had, or what I should say, what we further discovered is they had government approval to do this to us. And that intensely biased, prejudiced, and just slaughtered our families. And we're just the tip of an iceberg. At one time it was printed in the Edmonton Journal and the Edmonton Sun that there are no families within the boundaries of the province of Alberta that have not been affected in one way or another by what happened to us. What has been the problem for all injured workers to date is because of the sufferance. They can't work together, and they've never been able to, and they need a mediary type person to come in and assist to structurally set up something that could help them, which would be a fair and honest group. But when you get 100 or even 1,000, even Clint Dunford said, the minister responsible one time, that you can't get 1,000 injured workers at the same place at the same time to agree on the same thing. And he's 100% correct. And now Ralph and I and Peter, we experienced this over the years. There was people that sent hundreds and literally hundreds of people to me, unbeknownst to me either. They called a class action lawsuit, and in my case was the flagship of the lawsuit, and they never told me about it. And suddenly my phone starts ringing, and it got so bad that I almost had a breakdown listening to all these people and
Can
all
I
that
ask when
suffering.
that's, sorry, can I ask when that was? I think I know, but I just want to check.
Yeah, that would have been about 2006, 2007, in that range.
So we would have been in Wetaskiwin at that point?
In Wetaskiwin, yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that.
We were living in Wetaskiwin. And a person was just being bombarded by all of these people, and the sadness and the stories, you know, of people with their limbs cut off and sewed back on, but they're in excruciating pain.
For help.
And they're all crying for help, but they have nowhere to go. And what we realized back then is that we needed to form a group. We did attempt to do so twice. Ralph himself was the president of one, and we actually from the ground up created another one. But the same result happened with both of them, as you could not get the injured workers to get past their own existence and their own sufferance and that of their families. And so without organizing, the injured workers had no voice at all, whatsoever. And literally, our Bill of Rights, our Charter rights, every right you can pretty well think of that most Canadians take for granted, all of those rights were stripped from us completely. And we can prove it. And that's the purpose of what we're still doing and why we're still doing it. One, our families and ourselves have suffered greatly. Our conditions are getting worse as time goes on. And it's all for the same reason. That we were all abused in the same way. by the same people, and in turn, these very same people get to decide whether we get medical care or not. And in many cases, we can show that they've turned off programs that were for people such as us, and we don't get access to any of this treatment. There was many years that I went with no treatment at all. And I want anybody that listens to this tape just to close your eyes sometime and just simply imagine in your mind that in 1994 I break multiple vertebrae in my back and we crush thoracic 7 and 8 flatter than a pancake, and all the muscles and tendons, tendons and ligaments I should say, that run along the spinal column are all torn in half. And yet from that day all the way up to 2016, I do not receive any medical care. You will not see anything in my file relating to any fractures, more or less any crushed vertebrae. And when my new doctor told me to count them, count what you see on the x-rays, and it's been like this forever. And when I actually did count them, there is only 10 instead of 12 that you can visually see. And so, you know, myself personally, I hate words like conspiracy theorists or anything like that, because that doesn't apply to us. No. In any way, shape, or form.
This was purposely done.
Oh, no, absolutely. This is a business arrangement, shall we say, between the corporations and the members of the Alberta government.
We tripped upon this. What we found out is that they wanted to change the principle of the WCB from the Meredith system to this new system called the NELP system.
Just for clarity, NELP is NELP.
Thanks, I was going to ask.
Yeah. See, and that whole system didn't get changed. Now this started, the transfer to this system, we believe, started in the 80s. It was how should we say, planned out, changed. By 1995 is when the NELP system was
fully engaged, and the Meredith system was shut down.
What happened with myself is because I know this is because I'm in between. They used different parts of this.
You began with one and transitioned into the other.
Well, they did it either because they weren't supposed to, but they did it that way, and they used many different things. Now, what we're saying this is because what's happened here is they were not finished with putting it completely in place until they changed all the policies of the WCB, which didn't take place until after our protest in 2003.
Yeah.
Now, what we did, not knowingly, as we would find out all these things, all they were doing, like we complained that our doctors were all the specialists that we were being forced to go see, but they were always being told that they were wrong, and that their doctors were right. Then, what we found out over the years, they changed out all their doctors to specialists. In other words, they gathered all the specialists in, and the insurance companies, the WCB's insurance, but between that, they brought all this together, and now this is part under the NELP system.
And further, for anybody listening, you can look up the difference between the Meredith system and the NELP system, and it is fully explained, and you can get answers from the board and so on.
The thing before I forget is what happened here is the Meredith system collected money for the workers. Then that money was distributed. It was looking after the worker. Now the NELP system completely changed over. This all of a sudden belongs to the corporations. It's their money now. And see, now all of a sudden they have all these large surpluses, and they're, instead of all the injured workers since 2003 and the whole program got put into place, now you're seeing huge surpluses within the system, and they're going to pay all these companies and corporations. They want all this money now. But this is all the money that has actually been taken away from injured workers, and then now what's happened, it's been forced all onto society. Anybody that's on AISH or that like's been injured or whatever, and they can't get proper help, everybody's been thrown onto the system now. See, and they're talking about health care. We know what's going on. Sad to say. But this is the NELP system that they brought in. And what we're finding so curious about this, the government itself will not make a move without the WCB knowing what they do. That's how close they are. There is no distance between what they're doing. If the WCB wants a new law put in place, they just go ask the government in time, and they put it in place. This has been the norm in Alberta. Don't know, ask me why, but the corporations, at least the major ones, the big ones, they have a lot of pull in this province.
It's an insurance scheme, and that's what WCB is. And they incorporated themselves. Now, why would an insurance scheme set up by the Alberta government to protect injured workers need to incorporate itself and become a corporation? Corporations feed for one reason and one reason only, and that's to make a profit. And this is a non-profit entity that's supposed to be there for the injured workers. But it didn't sell to the world business investment community. What they wanted was workers that are controlled, and workers that do not get multi-million-dollar payouts for abuse at work when you're killed at work, and so on and so forth. And that's exactly what the Alberta government set up. And they could show, and Alberta's record does show it, that at certain peak times, massive amounts of investment have come from all over the world towards Alberta. And there's a very good reason for it, because none of the workforce is any problem anymore. The way they've set up and designed a lot of this legislation and the way they enforce it, in and of itself, is how they control everything. And unless you have a large sum of money, and your family has a large sum of money, you don't stand a chance to stand up against any of this sort of setup. And like we say, and we don't want people to get confused and think that we're harboring any ill will towards the WCB. It's most certainly
Many people there help us.
Well, we have private insurance companies at the same time.
Yeah.
And they have something in common that very few people know, is they can do whatever they want with your personal information, and you don't get to say anything about it, and half the time you don't even know what they're doing. And they get away with it because the government gave them permission to do so. And very few people know how this works, but once they do understand, it's actually rather repulsive to know that these entities, who you naively believe are here to help you, are actually have no intentions of helping you in any way, shape, or form.
And you know how they're hiding? Under this new system now, they're hiding under the new FOIP system. See, when they first came out with FOIP, this is how we were able to start digging in there and finding the information. But over the years, seeing how we've gone ahead, I mean, this is the whole reason why we seem to be targeted here, but we've been able to move it forward. Now, we understood how FOIP worked for a while, and we were able to gather huge amounts of information that nobody else was able to gain, and being able to work with people within the FOIP, how should we say,
it's the FOIP world, access to information world.
So they were very helpful to us back then, but that's all changed now. See, what you're seeing now is that the FOIP has been flipped. See, it used to be that it was supposed to be for people, normal people, to get their access to their information. Well, now it's all of a sudden turned into all kinds of huge privacy laws and everything else. But what you're seeing is it only protects the corporation. And you may
the government as well.
Well, government, corporation, because what I'm saying now, when I say corporations, the government's a corporation now. It's operating like a corporation. It doesn't work for the people.
So not necessarily that it's incorporated, but just it works in the same way.
Because of their closeness, and what you're seeing is the laws of this province work as a corporation now. They're so influenced by what the government says and does that, well, this is what we're seeing. Until they show us differently that they're not connected, we're saying this because this is what we're seeing. Until they can show something different, we believe that the connection between the legal department, the government, the WCB, they're all in hand. And we're saying even the medical association, they all work one in hand now. And they don't make move unless the justice system, who seems to be controlling it all, they are notified. Then the justice system decides where it's going to go from there. You know, whether the WCB, which seems to get a lot of the information that we're talking about sent to them all the time. Why are they getting all this? Well, in time, I guess we'll find out.
Well, that falls back again to what we said earlier. There are no entities within the boundaries of the province that we didn't go to, that we didn't engage. And they all had one thing in common. And that was the fact that they have no jurisdiction, for one thing, to even assist us. And even if they did, they wouldn't. And that's the problem with, these are the entities that are supposed to be here to make sure fair and honesty and equal justice, so to speak, for all. Well, that's the biggest load of crap that we ever encountered. It did go as far as even the Justice Minister of the day putting a departmental directive in place stopping all Crown personnel from speaking to us. And then when you consider that, and consider what I said earlier, that all of our Bill of Rights, Charter rights, and every other right you can think of as Canadian citizens
Has stopped.
it's gone. If my government can put a departmental directive in place that can take away all my rights, they can investigate me, they can prosecute me, they can do whatever they want, and they don't even have to serve me any documents or anything. It's just going to happen. There is no democracy left. It's gone. Even if what we had was called democracy, it's gone.
As a Native person, I believe that we never had these rights as a Native person.
These people are
But this
full control.
is now not just a Native issue. This is everybody's issue. I mean, we're talking about everybody from black,
Every working
white,
man, woman,
red,
and child
brown,
in the province is
all
affected by
colors that
that.
are coming to this country. This is a concern that they all need to look at, especially the educated ones. I mean, I believe that this country has such promises, especially with the young people's minds that are out there. But by the way they're being held and the information that they're lacking, in education, it's very cut and dry.
Yeah.
But in life, it's not cut and dry. And part of the reason why, you were asking, how did we become, we call ourselves, injured workers, maybe in some way we're advocate. Actually, what we say is we're survivors. I mean, we survived torture.
Yeah.
And because we were able to go through this, maybe this is just, I believe in karma. And, the way Anthony and I met, Peter, I mean, the way this all came about, I truly meant that it was all meant to be. We all have similar lives. Peter is from a different country, and he's had many traumas throughout his life that he's had to live.
And I'm sorry, where's Peter from again?
It used to be called Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what they call it now.
The former Yugoslavia.
The one thing about Peter's story is his family were lined up against a wall. And his whole family was lined up against a wall at one point. He had a sister and one other family member who had escaped to London, England. And then Peter was 8 and his older sister was 10 at the time. And they stood there while all of their family members were executed one at a time. And then when it came their turn, the guns were pointed at them. And the soldiers just started laughing and put the guns down and walked away. And there Peter and his sister were, 8 and 10 years old, with all of their family members that they ever knew, all dead on the ground around them, and you're free to go.
Yeah.
And they had to make their own way and find help, and then finally hook up with family, and then in turn, they were able to make their way over here.
And then for him,
But that's
to
what
grow
we're
up
trying to
here,
say, though. It doesn't matter where you come from at all. This has nothing to do with race whatsoever.
Yeah.
What this has to do with systemic corruption. There is a high volume of Aboriginal representation within Alberta. It's well known within the province that Aboriginals make up the largest number of prison inmates, and so on and so forth. So there is, to a certain extent, systemic racism or institutional racism. You can call it what you want. We do have that in our submission, and it's going to be handed over to the police to verify that these things did occur. But all we're trying to say for sure is this is not race specific. They will take out anybody. And when a person looks at, for example, everything begins with the Workers' Compensation Board. And so they say, by following their own numbers, and I believe these numbers are right, this is only my belief from what I see, but it's between 80 and 100,000 injured workers per year.
Do you know, sorry to cut you off there, do you know where you would have seen that number?
Which?
The 80 to 100,000?
Yeah, it's in the newspaper.
Okay, I'll try and find it.
Yeah, it was in the newspaper. I believe, to be honest, I believe the number they quoted in the paper was 95,000 on average injured workers a year, give or take. And now, they say that out of all of them, roughly 10 to 20% are the contentious ones, the ones that are going to take longer to heal and the ones they don't want to cover. And what we're trying to get people to understand is there are 4 million people plus that live in Alberta. Now count how many men working men, women and children there are that don't belong to unions and don't belong to the government. From what I understand, the government's records, it's just under 400,000 people work for the Alberta government, so you can eliminate them, you can eliminate the seniors. There is a way to calculate how many working men, women and children there are into the province, and every one of them is at jeopardy to have the same result happen to them that happened to us.
Yeah.
And this is the very reason why we can't stop. We have nothing left to lose.
And let me say this, even those people right now working with unions, they are not protected.
No, because our friend Peter is a union member to this day. Even though he was injured many years ago, he kept paying his union dues so he could stay active and stay in the loop, so to speak. And union members themselves have become replaceable, no question about it. When they decided to start cutting contracts back a few years ago, and the union said, okay, we have jobs to do, so they come to their local and they tell people about these jobs, and usually they had people running to them for these jobs.
Yeah.
But now the wages have been cut, and now a lot of the locals didn't want to take these jobs. Well, they were warned, if you don't take them, well, we will replace you. And nobody wanted to believe that they were going to do it. In 2004, when I wrote a worldwide submission, I wrote in there that it was the meat market exchange is what I called it, and we called it, simply because what they're doing, the Alberta government and their cronies within the corporate industry, is they're taking all the rights away from the existing workers that are here, and they're bringing workers in who will not ever have any rights whatsoever. Because we have found clauses within the legislation that even all these new immigrants and refugees that they're bringing in, that they give them citizenship, for example. We have found that a Canadian national can be deported within an hour. 1 hour, if the word comes down, to get them out of the country. The RCMP will be ordered to go pick up them and their families, take them to the airport, and you're gone. And it's that quick. And now how can they do that? What I wanted to know was, since I was born and raised here, how can you get rid of me? Where would you send me? And it's my basic understanding that it's not us in our generation. We're simply medical care is being withheld from us, and there's none of us will be in fact deported anywhere. But it's all the new people that are coming into the country. They're coming here with the idea that they're going to get a future, and everything's going to be rosy for them, especially since some of the countries they come from around the world are pretty impoverished and so on, and have pretty bad health systems. And they think they come here and life is going to be so good for them. But what they're going to encounter, if they get injured at work, which happens obviously, a large number per citizens per year get injured at work for one reason or another. It happens real fast in lots of cases. So you can train and hope for the best, but somebody still, and it's the law of averages. There are still going to be people get hurt. No matter how much safety you put in place, people still will get hurt for one reason or another. And that's all we're saying is these people that are coming in, they don't have any rights. We lived here and were born and raised here, and all of our rights were taken away. So if the people coming here think they have rights, they're sadly mistaken, and they're going to learn that very fact if they ever get injured at work, and they ever have to, not just get injured at work per se, if they ever have to actually engage with any of the different entities we spoke of, Ombudsman, Privacy Commissioner, Human Rights Commission, quasi and judicial processes within the province.
And I just want to cut you off there for a sec as well. Like, I can remember when Dylan and I were very young, you were dealing one-on-one with a number of MLAs and MPs as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And that's the other side of the fence as well. It's because most people didn't do what we did. And we went everywhere. We hit every entity. And we didn't stop there, though. We hit the federal entities as well. So in basically the file we have provincially is matched federally as to why we all live in Canada. And if we can prove that the Alberta government and their cronies are acting and conducting themselves in this fashion, which we believe is illegal, in turn, in committing fraud and other crimes against the citizens to take advantage over us, then why wouldn't our federal government assist us?
Mhm.
And now there is avenues legally to get the federal government to investigate provincial situations. And I did utilize that. This is the point I'm trying to make. No one will be able to even dream of any avenue of any authority in this country, whether it be in Alberta or Canada, that we did not bring to bear. We found every one that has anything to do with the circumstances we're dealing with, and we believed that if we could get an independent third party, independent and impartial third party, to investigate what took place, then they would straighten out this corrupt system that's abusing so many people. Because, like I say, just go back to the number, and even if we use 80,000 to 100,000 as the number per year, take 20% of those people. We're talking thousands and thousands of people, upwards of 20,000
Tens
per
of
year.
thousands.
Yeah, and now add it up every year. You know, and that's one thing that reflects back to that
Alberta
newspaper
have
story.
injured workers living across Canada.
Yeah.
Going around the world.
That work
They're
here.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And I feel real bad for the ones. It's bad enough that we live here, and we can fight and try and get some kind of medical care for our families. But the people who live in some of these third world countries, and I can't quote the names. I know in the newspaper Jamaica was one of them, and Peru and Colombia were other ones, where workers from those countries have come here and got butchered in one way or another, and they're being sent back home. And their healthcare systems back home is nothing.
But remember this, the perception that you can fight is actually a story.
Yeah.
I mean, you can make a stand and try to make a stand. I'm talking about all the university people out there, everybody. Your rights are not there. It is impossible to say that this is actually a democracy anymore. The way they've set up each province to be independent entities. Right now, I call Alberta, and it's kind of funny, eh? I call it a fascist, what's the word I'm looking for? It's corporate, I guess. Corporate auto...
Capitalism.
Well, it's an auto...
It doesn't
what is it for law? Auto...
I can't think of it.
Yeah, I can't think of it either. But it's turned into its own little banana republic. What we found out is that although criminal events have taken place, we can't take them anywhere, supposedly, because they happened here in Alberta. But
Yeah, okay, to correct that, sorry, I know what you're talking about now. The way the Constitution of Canada is written, the Constitution says
Autocratic.
There.
the
Yeah.
Constitution says very clearly that any crime that's committed within the country of Canada must be dealt with by the province and within the boundaries of the province of where the crime was committed, period. And so what they're trying to get us to understand federally was in fact that this is an Alberta problem. And what we were trying to get them to understand
This is a
it's
Canadian
not
problem.
an entity per se who's railroading us and hurting and killing people by withholding proper medical care. It's our own government who control the justice system. And they pay bonus money. And at one time, we were the only jurisdiction in the country to allow our judicial and quasi-judicial processes to be violated and to drag them into disrepute by paying bonus money into them. You don't pay bonus money into any kind of a process such as this because all of a sudden you cannot look me in the eye and tell me it's independent and impartial. One, money's talk, so it's not impartial. Number two, it's not independent anymore because of that money. If there's a flow of money going to the judges for rendering favorable decisions towards towards the government against the citizens, this is absolutely outrageous that it's allowed to continue. And this is what we tried to get the federal realm to understand. It's our own government that's doing this to us. And yet, in fact, they came up with one avenue that we could use. And that was, I needed to go to the Lieutenant Governor of Alberta and make presentation. It was a female at the time, Lois Hole. and I need to make presentation to her. And in turn, when I made contact with her office, she happened to be out of the country at the time, but what they did do is they hooked me up with her attorney, who represents the Lieutenant Governor of Alberta. And the avenue that I understand was that as long as I file application and I have evidence to support it, then the Lieutenant Governor of Alberta has the power to request that the Federal Justice Minister of Canada investigate what took place criminally within the boundaries of Alberta. And they do have authority.
They just never use it. That's part of the law, the way things operate today.
Yeah, and that's true. And any Albertan that wants to check this out, or anyone, for example, go to the Lieutenant Governor's website, and you'll see who the very first Lieutenant Governor was leading up to present day. And you'll be able to see yourself how this setup came to be that we're describing. For example, and really quick like, you'll see that the very first Lieutenant Governor of Alberta, he chopped the province up into 24 pieces, but before he did it, he ran a survey to see who would vote for who. And then all of a sudden they realized that you can't have government unless you have an opposition. And so they had to rearrange one of the boundaries and move it so one of the seats could be given up. And that's how Alberta began. And it's true, this is all written within the biographies of the different lieutenant governors, and it's on their own website. People can check it out for themselves. This place is extremely corrupt in its creation and in its existence throughout the years, and we don't believe anything's really changed to present day.
How are you going to change it?
Considering what you find.
Yeah.
And so, to get back to what I was saying, in 1936, at Christmas time, when everybody thought that the legislature was shut down, and they went home for Christmas, the existing government at the time kept 6 people behind, and it takes 5 minimum to change legislation at the time. And what they did is they slipped in 3 pieces of legislation, and they voted it into legislation, and they passed it into law. Well, nobody even knew about it. And after Christmas, when everybody comes back from Christmas holidays, they find out that these 3 pieces of legislation are in play, and they're actual law, and a war erupted. There was actually death threats, and one person was arrested for threatening to murder another MLA and stuff like this. It was just a crazy time. And so to resolve the matter, what had happened is they asked the Alberta Lieutenant Governor at the time to bring in the Federal Justice Minister to investigate the matter and make a decision. And at the end of the day, all 3 of those pieces of legislation at the time were shut down. And now, if you realize, take your time as an Albertan and as a citizen to look up this piece of our own history, and you'll see between the Christmas time of 36 into early 1937, we wanted to create a bank of our own. Well, they didn't get to do it then, but it did later on become the Alberta Treasury Branch, run and controlled by the province of Alberta, just like they wanted to originally. They wanted to control all newspapers and any broadcasting, and they actually had fines. If you printed anything at the time that was dissenting towards the government, you could get up to $1,000 fine. And think about it, in 1937, $1,000 is it's like a
pretty penny
astronomical amount today. You pick up jail time. These are the kinds of things.
But
that
they've actually done that now.
Yeah.
In today's
everything
world,
they tried, but I'm just saying that
it's actually in play now. They've actually been able to do it.
But to follow back on what I'm saying, though, that is the example that will verify what I'm saying. We did discover this avenue of trying to get the Federal Justice Minister in, and that's exactly how we found it. If we started reading our own history, and we started reading it, that we're not the first people to get railroaded by our government. Now, how did people handle this in the past? We had to do a lot of research to figure out different avenues to move forward. No injured workers have ever moved forward anywhere. Anybody that had family that had enough money to sue on behalf of the worker, settlements were signed, but those are all sealed. And only under special circumstance and it'll be a very expensive, difficult process to open those files to see why the government settled and have that
Which
be used by
someday
other
soon
people.
we might see. This might be able to be looked into.
So the avenue of attempting to get out of the province using the legal process on that way failed, because when I spoke to the lawyer for the Lieutenant Governor, Peter was his first name. I'd have to look in my records to verify his last name. But the man starts laughing at me, and he's telling me that everything I told him can't happen because we in Alberta have so many checks and balances in place that what I described, it's impossible for it to happen. But we found out differently, and that's why we're still pursuing it. It's simply because you don't need to run this scam that they are running. You don't need 100,000 people. All you need is the heads of the public bodies to be participating in what you're doing. And who gets to disperse all the bonus money every year since they started the bonus program in Alberta? And it happens to be the head of the public body. Now, does he or she, and ask yourself this question, it's a real simple one, does he or she, who is the head of that public body, who gets to decide how much bonus money each person within their departments get, do they abuse that process, or do they distribute that money fairly and honestly? That's one question. And number two, there is no written criteria as to who gets what. So how does each individual that has this big slush fund, how do they decide how they're going to distribute it? From our experience, you follow the status quo, and you ensure that things are status quo. So in other words, that injured workers are not moving forward, and you shut them down, you'll get a bonus for it.
This all, by the way, started with the WCB and their bonus program.
Yeah, the bonus program did begin at the board, and down the road, the government decided to implement it within 19. The best that I can do through the research is I can show an example from 1992, where bonus money was paid out. Now, how much before that, I don't know, but for sure from 92, it didn't actually become law that they could actually pay bonus money within the government until like 96, 97. I think it was July of 1997 when the law was actually passed to allow bonus money. So these guys were getting their hands in the cookie jar well before, and they've got a whole pile of really nice names. We have quite a list of different names that identify the same fund, and they're distributed. So as once again, why would that be? Well, because you've got all the heads of these different public bodies, Privacy Commissioner, Human Rights Commission, and so on, and all these different governmental departments like education, agriculture, and so on and so forth. They each get to decide who gets the money and why, and how much you're going to get. And they set the criteria, and they get to call it what they want. And that's why you end up with
a massive amount of money went out the door.
They couldn't come out and say one name fits all, because the public would be able to see that as easy as day. And so they allowed each entity to create the name that they wanted to create, and that's why we have such a vast list of different entities. And another example quickly of the bonus money issue that can be proven by any citizen if they wish to. One of the quickest ways would be called the Board of Trustees of the Athabasca University that I had dealings with years ago. I told them the truth, that in fact you're a university, so how come you don't receive any bonus money? And they said, well, universities and colleges don't get bonus money. And I said, oh yes they do. And then and then I even listed off a number of them that I'd already spoken to and have confirmed, and then that's how I was generating the list of names that each of them call it. I never did find any two entities that called it the same thing. Each entity had a different name for how they're distributing the money. But one thing all the entities had in common is all the money came from the same spot. It's the bonus money that's being paid out for participating in the status quo. And as I say, the status quo is, they are the elite, so to speak. They're the civil service, they're the government, they're the
It's not just the bonus money, it's also the contracts. The contracts,
well, the
bonus is already,
then
then the bonus money is already written into it. No matter what they do, which they always do what they're told, but they get it anyway. So in other words, if you fire them, they still get their bonus.
Yeah.
Like this is the strangest stuff you can see, but what this
well,
does.
and further, it's with Ralph and the contracts too. There's another clause in there that's even more important than money. It's a gag order.
Yes.
Now, I got a phone call one time from Lukasic, Minister Lukasic. He was the Minister of Human Resources in Alberta at the time. And instead of talking to me in his office where he would have had access to his computer and he could have been looking up things before he shot his mouth off, he gets into an argument with me over the phone while he's driving his car on his way home. And it was, you can hear the vehicles. And see, I never did disclose that, neither did Ralph. We are quite a few minutes into this already. According to this thing, it's 49 minutes we've been sitting here talking. And I should have clarified this right from the beginning. And I will clarify this for anybody that might be listening to this. I know that some of the things that we said, some people have called us crazy. Other people have called us conspiracy theorists. Other people just will not fathom that even a third of what we have to say about what takes place in this province could ever even happen. But what I want to make explicitly clear right here and now is Mr. Teed and I recorded everybody, and we recorded everything. And so when I say we went to these different entities, and I say something happened there, what I say happened, happened. And we have the audio to prove it happened.
And that's because Alberta has single-party consent, right?
Yeah, it's if you go to the Crown Prosecutor, I went to a Chief Crown Prosecutor, and I asked him if I could record people without their knowledge within the boundaries of Alberta, and he said yes, you can. It's called single-party consent, as you quoted, and what that law means is, do I myself give permission to record the conversations or the event prior to it beginning? And I gave myself permission to do so, and then that means that even during the event or discussion, phone call or otherwise, even if the other party asks me outright, are you recording me? I do not have to tell them the truth, because I've already given my permission to record them, so I can say anything I want thereafter. And usually I say no, because the bottom line is, when people don't think they're being recorded, they say a large number of things that they shouldn't have said. And this is exactly how we've figured out what is taking place within the province throughout each of these entities that stopped us from getting fair and honest investigations. And when you compare the audio with the written record, there is no dispute to what happened here. And this has been the case all along. It's not a matter that there's a dispute about what we have for evidence and what we say has occurred. What does matter is there's no one within the province of Alberta that has any authority whatsoever to investigate what we're saying. You attempt to go to the police services, everybody would say, well, go to the Edmonton Police Service, and they actually have policies in place not to investigate the fraud. As a matter of fact, Ralph has a letter, Peter has a letter, I have a letter. I found a professor at Grant MacEwan that has a letter.
Do you recall that professor's name by chance?
I have it in my records, and I can bring it up because he actually was in the Edmonton Journal and the Edmonton Sun.
Sorry, he or she?
He.
He?
And I know he deals with Aboriginal languages. He's a professor that teaches something to do with the languages. And there's various types of fraud. And so exactly what type of fraud that he had approached, like myself, Peter, and Ralph, the fraud that we speak of is fraud of service. The WCB had an obligation to assist us after our work-related injuries, and the government of Alberta had an obligation to make sure that they did so. And when we found out that both of them were conspiring together to make sure that didn't happen, that's what set the course, right? And so, at the end of the day, even in 2005, we discovered that the Alberta government granted some legislation in place to give WCB employees immunity for what they've done. And now we further discovered that none of that does apply to us per se. It does apply to everybody else after that date.
We were already in motion. In other words,
Yeah.
they couldn't stop what we were already doing.
No.
Yeah.
And that's what the law was actually put in place. It was actually because of exactly what we were doing. We were uncovering things that nobody could actually fathom would be uncovered. And then not having an avenue for 10 years, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere. I mean, some of the things, funny things that happened to us, we don't call them funny. There's reasons for them happening.
Well, and take for one example.
My dad, out of nowhere, we get into a conversation about the racial part of this that happened to me, which disturbed him so much because he was military police for 21 years. He was he served overseas as a peacekeeper. So, I mean, he served the country well. He was into intelligence even in his service of time. So when your dad went to the military police, after my dad was so angered, he wanted to go talk to some of his friends, but he's 87.
Yeah.
And he had to think for a few minutes, there's not too many of these guys around and they're all retired anyway. So nobody would even probably know him, eh? And that's what his concern was, but, there's got to be something we can do. So we got into the conversation, and he said, well, we should go talk to the police, to the military police. Ask them. I talked to your
The
dad.
reason we should clarify why this happened. We're skipping ahead a little bit. When we approached the Edmonton Police Service, we have to have evidence to prove that they did something wrong. So
Yes.
wrong that it'd be considered criminal in nature. And what the Edmonton Police Service did, and we can say this part openly because it is public. I did make this part public years ago.
Most of what we're
And
saying,
so-
we made public.
But not into the extreme details because we're about to file a criminal complaint.
Yes.
And Ralph's family will be filing some civil suits. We have to be cautious on how we say what we're saying. But what we're trying to get people to understand is these things did happen, and we recorded everything, and no one, not one target involved here, can get out from what happened. What they do expect is time. Time will go by, and we will either move away, die off, or otherwise, but no case will go forward. To compound our problem was to the fact that the Supreme Court of Canada came out with a ruling that states that any case that's 6 years or older, that all of the witnesses are in fact vague. And it's very rare.
I'm sorry.
Vague.
The witnesses
Vague.
are vague.
Mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, they won't be able to accurately remember the details. It's too long.
Yeah.
And so they don't like to hear cases like that. There has to be very special circumstances. And the reason our case, and so before we get to what Ralph was talking about, I want people to know what happened and why we're doing what we're doing. And as I say, we went to all the other entities I mentioned, and which is anyone and everyone within the Alberta government, other than education and agriculture and so on, but anything that had to do
Now we
with
could
the
grow
law.
some green and this would all go away. Well,
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the Edmonton Police Service refused to receive anything from me. And they unceremoniously throw me out the door and send me off to see the Auditor General of Alberta. And they even made the appointment for me to go speak to them. But the police themselves refused
Yep.
to take anything from me whatsoever. And in turn, I had, at the time, that was one entity that I missed, was the Auditor General, so I accepted the appointment. And then after I had the appointment with the Auditor General and found out that the gentleman was lying to me, we refused to deal with his office anymore, and I reapproached the police. And the police began to state that we've already dealt with this matter. Well, how did you deal with this matter? You didn't accept anything from me, so how did you deal with it? Of course, no one wanted to talk. But as Ralph mentioned, we have privacy laws in Alberta, so I put in access requests and FOIA requests. And when I get the file, is how I discovered what they did. As I mentioned earlier, we sent information out worldwide. Two pieces of paper that had my name attached to it were picked up by a third party in Edmonton, an old fellow at the time. He was 80-some years old at the time he did it. And what he did is this guy adds 43 more pages of his concerns, and he used the 2 pages that I'd sent out to corroborate what he's saying. And he wanted the Edmonton police to investigate. Now, of course, the Edmonton police accepted his information, gave him a file number, because whenever your evidence is accepted, they'll get a file number for tracking and so on and so forth, and for court and
But
everything.
get a load of this, they wouldn't give us one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so, in this case, though, it turns out that the FOIA request does show that from my day I visited them, there is a file number. Well, now how can that be when I didn't give them anything because they refused to take anything from me? And now suddenly there's an existing file number with my name attached to it, my birth date and everything that identifies me directly, the very guy that went to the police demanding that they conduct an investigation, and yet in fact they refused to accept anything from me, and suddenly they have a file that's got, all this information in it, so I want it. And when the file shows, when the FOIA coordinator calls me, she states to me that this is the oddest situation that in all of her years she's ever encountered. And what has happened here is, unless I can tell them what the name is of the third party
I knew it right
that
away.
submitted the 45 pages, the original 45 pages that the EPS reached into and grabbed 2 of my pages out, and then they created a file for me digitally using the record that this gentleman submitted. And so that's what opens up my file. Nothing that I submitted. I had no knowledge the police were doing any of this crap. It wasn't until later I find out about it.
It's all
And so
illegal what they're
this
doing.
has all been done digitally. And so in turn, they're telling me we can't legally give you your own file, my own file, unless I can tell them the name of the person who submitted the 45 pages.
Eric.
Well, at the time, it is rather insane, but there is one gentleman in the province of Alberta who is an injured worker.
We'll just call him Eric.
Yeah, we'll just call him Eric. Then we don't have to describe his last name because I don't have permission to give out his last name, but his first name is Eric. Really nice guy at the time. I think he's passed now. I don't believe he survived this long, but
He's stressed out, that guy.
the bottom line is, out of 1 million people that lived in Edmonton at the time, I actually gave her the name. I gave her Eric's name. And the woman could not believe it, but that is the person. And there is a reason why. The government of Alberta, many ministers' offices, it was incredible. It was even written in the papers before, but Eric's got tons and tons of letters in his file from all these powers to be. Because Eric's operandi, modus operandi I guess it's called, is when he wanted the minister's attention, Eric went and bought himself a fax machine. So Eric wouldn't send you 5 or 8 faxes and ask you a question. He would start out with one. And then pretty soon, if you're not answering his question, you're about to receive 300 pages. And if you don't answer his question, he's going to give you 5,000. And he was this mindset. And he did it to everybody. And it was well known around the injured workers. And not only that, Eric had given me access to his file. And I've actually read just a whack of them, of different ministers and their assistants, chiefs of staff. Even the premier and his, Peter Elzinga at the time was the chief of staff to Ralph Klein at the time. And even he, everyone was complaining and begging Eric to stop it and quit doing this to us. You're wasting a lot of paper. We understand your concerns, and we need you to stop this. It's tying up a lot of
Well, first they
resources.
demanded that he stop, and then when he didn't, they begged him.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, though, when the lady asked me if I could give her the one name of the person in Edmonton who had faxed in that 45 pages, when she said the word faxed, I instantly locked on to Eric.
Right away, yeah.
Yeah. And I had contact with this gentleman, and I knew that I'd given him 2 pieces of my paper that I'd written and sent out broadcasted worldwide, and he wanted to use it.
And when you say broadcast, I just want to interject here. Can you describe what you mean by broadcast? Because I have very vivid memories of this.
Yeah, I did it multiple ways, but and I had to do this legally because if you don't follow the law, then they'll come after you. And at one time, I had the SWAT team raid my house for various reasons, looking for
Oh, I remember that one.
explosives.
That was in Edmonton?
That was in
Yeah.
Edmonton.
Yeah.
And throw me on the ground and abuse me and everything based on false information. I know who gave it to them and everything because I recorded everything. But there's no place for me to go with this particular information and so on and so forth.
Well, there hasn't been.
Not to date, but that's going to change. So anyway, the situation, and I do want to finish this before we get too far away from the focus of what did the Edmonton Police Service do to me that prompted me now to notify them that I'm filing a criminal complaint, not just against the officers involved, but the police themselves, the Edmonton Police Service itself. And that is because they created a virtual file. And right there and then, as soon as I saw that I was right with Eric, he was the one that submitted it, and they did not accept any evidence from me whatsoever, and that they'd used these 2 pieces of paper to open up a file on me. And now what the police, and I have this in writing as well, what the EPS say is we reviewed the evidence within your file, and there's no crime here. And I have that in writing. So one, they refused to accept anything from me whatsoever, and they sloughed me off to the Auditor General, who sloughed me off as well. And the police won't even give me access to my own file unless I can prove who actually submitted the original information for the file, which verifies I had no knowledge of anything of what they were doing. And they illegally created a file with my name and file number, birth date and everything, and it was done behind my back covertly so they could play this game. It was completely illegal. You can't do that kind of thing.
When we were uncovering all this stuff, I mean, we were just dumbfounded, shocked maybe even. I mean, and then when that was over, then we'd get, angered and
Well,
there was a lot of emotions we were going to. I mean, when we were uncovering all this stuff, the conspiracy to stop us from getting the information and going forward.
And so
it was just unbelievable.
we know what happened to my case so far, but I like to corroborate things, and I like two of everything. Because if I want to go forward, Ralph uses the word conspiracy at times, or theorists at times. I don't use those words. I'm going to let the facts speak for themselves, because we believe as long as we can show two or more of every incident that we bring forward.
I don't use conspiracy. I don't, because I don't think so. I don't think this is a conspiracy. I believe this was purposely something that they planned and set
this is
up.
going to be something the police can determine. But the thing of it is, it's not the first time that we'll engage the Edmonton Police Service. As I say, I have a document from them telling me that fraud is the #1 rising crime in North America, but we don't have any resources to investigate anything, so in turn you'd be better off to sue. That's what the form letters are stating from the police to the citizens. That's also exactly what the professor at the Macewan University got, and amongst tens of thousands of other Albertans have gotten this as well. But to go back to what I'm saying is, everything I'm saying, I want verification. So I manually go to the Edmonton Police Service. I manually get to the right floor where the IT people are in the FOIP office and Access to Information office is, and I go up to the counter, and I know the FOIP laws. I've read them, I understand them, and so I ask the person if they please go get my file, because I want to review it and decide out of it what you're going to photocopy for me and that I'm going to pay for. And that is an honest request that any citizen can make at any entity that you believe holds any of your information. You're not expected to go in there and print off 500 documents. The law does give you the option to walk in there and review the file and isolate which ones you'd like copied. And that, in and of itself makes sense. But when I did it though, that further corroborated a problem, because they can't find them. 20 minutes, half an hour goes by, and then he's got a supervisor helping him, and nobody can find a hard copy of my file anywhere. So then they both come and sit right in front of me and get on that computer again, and they're going to figure this out. And these guys know how to work the computer system. One guy tells me, and you can hear him on the tape, remember what I said, I record everything. And so when you hear this gentleman speaking to his supervisor, he's the one that calls it a virtual file. You see what they did here, he says? They reached into this third party's file, and they took out 2 documents digitally, and then they posted them and created Mr. Hughes' file that way. So Mr. Hughes, it doesn't have any hard copies. That's why we can't find any. It's a virtually created file, which is completely illegal. But yet they got away with it, because who's going to investigate the police? And don't mention, and I apologize for saying that, we know quite a bit about the police commission and why nobody in their right mind would ever file. As I say, we went to every entity there is, and we have evidence against them all.
Well, you're not mentioning the RCMP, because the city police was actually quite soft.
Well, we haven't got to the RCMP yet, but
the RCMP was a whole another story.
And so when the EPS did what they did, then we went to the RCMP. And the RCMP will just try to state that they don't have jurisdiction, because through the Police Act, the way it's written, certain laws are dealt with provincially by the local authorities, and other laws are dealt federally by the RCMP. And in what we're dealing with, they refuse to participate. But I did have a meeting with the Assisting Acting Commissioner of K Division, Alberta, and in discussion with this said person, he described to me exactly what would have to happen if a caseworker at the WCB did such and such. That would be considered a criminal event, and if it does occur, that's the jurisdiction of the Edmonton Police Service, and they have to investigate. It's their job, they have to do it. And that's a quote, actually. You'll hear him say that on the tape.
But that's also a setup.
Yeah, all of it is.
Yeah.
Because the bottom line is,
they were getting us running around.
I already told them that the police, what the Edmonton Police Service has done. And so they have no intentions of investigating anything fairly and honestly about what we're bringing forward, which started out to be, once again, issues related to WCB. All of a sudden now we've got all these different governmental entities and all these different people that work there are now all trapped and caught by the audio itself and by their own handwritten signatures on documents. And when you put it all together, the picture is painted. You can't dispute why, what, where, and how. It's all right there in front of you. The only thing we've ever said is if we received a fair and honest investigation, we believe that all of these persons and entities would be found out to have committed a crime against us. And since they are the ones in power in Alberta, and the Constitution gives them themselves the right to investigate themselves and tell us whether they themselves did anything wrong, that's the very reason why nothing has ever changed in Alberta. The Compensation Board have contracts that have gag orders written in them, and most of the other entities do as well. You accept bonus money, you accept everything doing your jobs, and you can never discuss it, ever. And that boils back to the minister responsible phoning me from his car. I should finish that as well. I'm sorry for jumping around, but he tries to tell me, and he is the minister responsible at the time, so one would assume that what he's telling me is the truth. And what he's telling me is there's nobody, no human nor any entity within our entire country that does not have a time limitation attached to you. And what that means is, depending on who you are, in this case we're talking a government minister, and he has staff. Well, his staff will take 1 oath. The minister will take 7. And parts of these oaths dictate whether you can or cannot discuss anything that happened while you held that office. And the way he describes it to me, which is, again, is caught on tape, and it was Minister Lukasik, Thomas Lukasik at the time, driving in his car, being a smartass, but we get into an argument. I'm telling him there is no time limitation. There's a gag order written into the contracts. And that's why you'll never hear anyone ever speak about what happened while they worked for the Compensation Board. In the history of the province of Alberta, you cannot show me not even one newspaper article, story or otherwise, where anyone that ever worked for there in the police or the appeals commission, claim service review committee, or any aspect of all of it, none of them are ever allowed to speak of anything, or they will be wiped out. And it's written right in there. And so he argues with me on the phone, and you can hear it. This is what we're taking. You can't hear it per se, but this is what we're taking forward in part of our complaint. It's the entire audio library set up beside all the documentation. These people do not stand a chance. They did do all these things we say they did. We can prove they did it all, but we've never had it up until this point anywhere to go. And so the bottom line to the story is we go to the RCMP and we won't go away. We're telling them that you told us what is a crime. We show you examples of exactly what you said, which verifies that these crimes were committed and that the EPS holds jurisdiction, but we further prove to you why the EPS isn't going to investigate, because they themselves committed a crime against me by filing this false file and creating this bogus file and putting my name and number to it, and yet in fact we've never exchanged anything. The purpose of a file number is to track your file. You submit a written complaint, you have evidence that you hand over to the police, and they'll hand you a file number. And that way in the future, whether you're through the investigation or if it's going to be going to court, that file number will remain referenced to that material. But if you don't give them anything, they're not going to give you a file number. And as I say, that's why it's illegal in my case as to how they did it, to stop any investigation. The RCMP gets sick and tired of us not going away. And in turn, they decide to put me on camera. And this happened out at the Leduc Detachment. And they brought a gentleman out, a specialist from Edmonton, and they put me on camera for 8.5 hours. And then a month and a half later, they phoned me. So what I'm told when I did the in-camera interview is that I would be contacted in writing telling me the outcome of their investigation as soon as they knew. And instead of that, I get a phone call, which is recorded of course, and they're verbally telling me that they reviewed everything that was submitted and there's no crimes here, and that they want me to come and pick up all the junk or stuff, evidence. I have some audio, video, cassettes, paperwork, and in this box. And so when I go out there, and then what they're telling me on the phone, I should clarify this, is I can come and pick up everything. And then you'll hear him say it very specifically that we made a tape for you. Like we recorded the entire interview, the 8.5 hours. And then once we give it back to you and give it to you, then in turn you can swear affidavit to it and you can use it in these quasi-judicial and judicial processes you're involved in. So that's a fairly powerful piece of evidence. And at the time I thought this is going to be great once I get my hands on it. The bottom line is, when we got to the RCMP detachment, I'm looking at a white box. So already red flags went up. And I said to my wife at the time, there's something wrong here.
Wife at the time? So are you talking about my mother or your previous wife?
Yeah, your mother.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to place this in time.
Yeah. And so that's when we lived in Leduc. As a matter of fact, in the Palace, which was an apartment
I thought that's
right,
when we were
right
talking
across
about.
from the hospital.
Yeah.
And the RCMP.
Yeah, the
station
RCMP
across the
detachment
street
is
as well.
just across the street with the fire hall, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what happens is it's a white box. They want me to sign, and once I sign off, they give me the box, and there's all kinds of stuff in the box. But already there's a problem. It's not the right box. But I don't trust them. And so I'm going to take that box, and I'm going to go home, and I'm going to see what's in this box. And as a matter of fact, you don't remember this, because you were pretty small at the time.
I was not that small.
Well, you were, I believe, 6, 7 years old.
In the
Just
Palace?
starting school, I think.
Yeah, no, you would have been that old.
Yeah, because I started because I actually have a note here as an introduction for my essay, is I wanted to write about the first time you, Ralph, ever came over to our house. Because I remember that vividly.
I can give you that date. It was October 18th, 2002.
Yeah, because I remember it vividly because Dad put on a nice shirt and he was wearing cologne, and Mum got all dressed up and had on Grandma's jewelry, and then Dylan and I had to stay in our rooms. Like, we couldn't use the bathroom, we weren't allowed to leave, because this was like an important day.
It truly was, and
It was important for me.
Yeah, it was important for everyone.
I was in
all
bed
that-
sick. Literally, I was laid out. I mean, I was not just mentally, physically.
all that was the Appeals Commission of the WCB had denied me without even conducting a hearing or anything. And I was questioning how you can even do that.
Yeah.
You send me documents telling me we're going to have a hearing and then I'll get a fair decision and all this garbage. And all of a sudden you're rendering the decision and we haven't even had the hearing yet. And the woman laughs at me. And she just can't control herself. She's destroyed my life and that of my family and participated in it. And she thinks it's funny. And she's telling me to go show my documents to the neighbor and let him read the letter and he'll explain.
It's when your dad told me that.
That this is over. You're not going to, you already had your hearing. Well, no, I didn't. No hearing occurred. Nothing happened. Except you people made a decision and say that the game is over and that's the end of it without even conducting process. What makes that disgusting is a guy named Bill Bonner was a sitting MLA within the Alberta legislature in the opposition party, and he decided to be my advocate. And at that very moment that we announced to WCB that he's going to be my advocate in my upcoming hearing, all of a sudden there is no hearing. I receive a final and binding decision wiping me completely off the map, and yet there was no hearing. There was nothing. And that's how they played the game.
Yeah.
They play the game any way they want, right?
And I'm sorry, you were talking about this box and
Yeah, we got
talking
a
about how I
straight
don't
away.
remember things.
Okay, so what's in the box is, in the 8.5 hours while I was talking to the police, and as I was showing them documentation and the audio that attached to it, they would take it and slide it into a plastic, what they called evidence pouches. And then we would write on the outside everything, and right in front of me, those pouches are sealed. And if you've ever dealt with the police in any way, and ever saw one of these pouches, when you close it, it's as if it's been cemented shut.
No problem.
You will never open that pouch again. You have to cut them open. That's the only way to get into them once they're sealed. And that's why they do it that way, is to show you that your evidence is secure.
Yeah.
So the box is full of this, including, I noticed, 2 VHS tapes. And so I put the tapes in. But before I proceed to the tapes, I need to tell you about the pouches. One, over the phone, they told me that they reviewed everything submitted and there's no crime here. But in truth, only one evidence pouch was cut open. And that was the pouch that carried the tape that I mentioned earlier, that I had a meeting with the Assistant Commissioner of the RCMP at K Division, and he describes to me what a crime would be, and that we have evidence of that, take it to the EPS, they have jurisdiction and all that. Yeah, that was the tape. They had cut that one open and they had listened to that conversation, but they had not cut anything else open. None of the other pouches were open at all. So that one verifies that they didn't, all they'd look for was to see exactly what he said to me and to make sure that they could protect him from any legal recourse for what they did to me. That's what the RCMP did. They didn't try and protect me. They didn't try and protect any of the people that are associated with me or any injured worker within the province of Alberta. They chose to try and protect their own. But the mistake that they make is, and it was you that caught it, and you don't remember this, but I put the tapes in, and I would, the first VHS tape, you were watching TV, and I interrupted your TV show because Daddy needs to play these tapes. And so I decided that, and of course you didn't like it, but you get to watch something that's got me, your dad, in it, and so that sort of, smoothed things over. So we put the VHS tape in, and what it shows is I'm in the RCMP detachment. They had overhead camera, they had a side camera, and they had an audio microphone hidden in the room. And in turn, they didn't even tell me about that when we were in there. It wasn't until later I find out that that's how they did it. Anyway, the point being is I'm watching this and I'm listening, and at the same time I'm making notes, and all of a sudden you say, "Hey Dad, what happened?" And so I stopped, I hit pause on the VHS, and I asked you what you're talking about. And you were just a little kid at the time. It just amazes me that you are the one that caught this, that aspect of my file. And in turn, what you said was the clock. There's something wrong with the clock because the time changed. Like it was working for whatever reason. While I was watching the tape itself and listening to what was being said and making notes, you were watching the numbers on the clock, and something flashed, and suddenly the numbers changed drastically, and that's when you called me over and brought this to my attention. So I rewound the tape, and it's no crap. When you play the tape, you all of a sudden see the clock change. And now, what's missing? What happens is you look at the clock, the date and time of the clock, right when the flash occurs, and then you see the tape resume again. Now you take my conversation that I had with the Assistant Commissioner of the RCMP, right? And you look at the tape and see exactly how long that was. That was 93.5 minutes. You take that and you slide it right in there. Everything I told the RCMP about my discussion with that officer, including playing the tape in the room and further discussing it, the RCMP had edited that off of my tape. And you were the one to catch it. You were the one that led me on to it. But remember, there was 2 tapes. And when we played the second tape, turns out there's a second piece against Dr. Larry Olhauser that used to work as the WCB Medical Panel Commissioner. And I am the first person in the province. Well, they say if I'm not the first, I'm one of the first 3 that were ever brought into that process. And I can prove beyond a doubt how corrupt and dirty that process is because I caught them.
And what process is that, sorry?
It's the WCB Medical Review Panel process. If you've finished all appeals as a last resort, they will bring together 3 specialists, and Dr. Olhauser, he was the commissioner of the process, so he got to contact all these different, he's the one that set everything
Was that
up.
before or after the changes?
That was after the
It
changes.
would have had to have been
see,
after.
Yeah.
see, and that's what saved me, Frank and your dad. Actually, I think Frank was number 1. You were probably number 2. Because Frank got wiped right out. And
Yeah,
then-
no, I'm the first, no, we're talking the medical review panel, not
Yeah, yeah.
FOIP.
No,
Yeah.
I'm talking about FOIP.
Yeah, no, Frank's and everybody else were after mine, well after mine. Another thing that's on record, and I have been contacted by lawyers over the years, is mine is the only file on record not to be wiped out. And they wanted to know how I won. I'm the only one that they could say
That means it's
that won.
100%.
100%
Nobody
wipeout.
going through the gauntlet can win anymore.
Yeah.
Not through that process. And then that's what I explained to them, to these lawyers and their families and the families of the victims. I didn't win. What I did is I caught them cheating. And I caught Olhauser and his people and the vice president, or the president of WCB at the time, Guy Kerr. I caught them cheating. And when I caught them cheating, that was the end of it. I refused to participate in that crap anymore. And so, at the end of the day, we have evidence against the RCMP now that verifies that we can't go to them and get a fair and honest and independent and impartial investigation of any kind. So we can't go anywhere in the government, we can't go to Alberta Justice, we can't go to the EPS, the CPS, or the RCMP.
Or the medical association, because we went through that gauntlet too.
Yeah, the College of Physicians, every entity is dirty, and we can prove it. The point is then, we don't have money, and the only avenue we could think of at the time was to get to the Supreme Court. So we spent a couple of years working on that, coming up with ideas on how to try and make it work, and so on and so forth. That ended up collapsing, and
Sorry to cut you off again. Are you talking about WEPSA there?
yeah, well, at that time, that was one of the solutions we'd come up with. If we created an injured workers group and brought all these people in, then we could create fundraisers and such. But see, at the time, naively, we believed that we could actually make a group of injured workers work. And this is what I said.
Find the right entity and the right number of people and put them all together.
And everybody donates
we had a number of
fundraisers. But anyway, before I finish, you can hear on the tape that doesn't work. And it was a complete and absolute trash waste of time. Everybody got stabbed in the back. The whole thing got destroyed. And nothing ever came of it.
Yep.
So it was a complete waste of time. And that's why.
But we had to do it.
We never did. Well, we had to learn that it was all bullshit. And it's not going to work. And we needed to know why it wouldn't work, so we'd never do it again. And that's exactly it.
Only got to get burned once.
Oh yeah, in a situation like that.
Well, I've got knives in my back still.
Oh yeah, I became homeless.
Yeah.
And my family was taken away from me.
Yeah.
And this is basically what happens to everybody. You know, it's the same result for everybody. Anybody that engages these people, you will find out. Naively, you try and give them everything to show the truth. But you don't realize that they're using it against you to wipe you out.
Yeah.
And they're doing it on purpose with permission from the government, which is another thing that's so vile and repulsive about this. It's because we naively, as most Albertans do, we believe that the government was here for us. We're Albertans, we're the taxpayers, we mean something. But in reality, the government doesn't give a shit about us in any way, shape, or form. They could care less what happens to our family. And their only purpose of keeping us around is to make money off of us. Because as Ralph mentioned earlier, all the injured workers who are getting screwed are being downloaded onto the social systems of Alberta, who inevitably are all paid by the taxpayer. Their medication, their treatments, and everything now is being paid by the taxpayer instead of being paid by the people who should be paying it, and that's the compensation board. But that's the scam.
And that's where the doctors come in now.
They're showing investors and employers that you can come to Alberta and run a business. And you don't need to worry about the workers. We have this scheme set up to make sure that the workers won't be a problem. And you don't have to worry about big settlements or anything like that if people get hurt working for you. Even if you kill them, the worker will not be receiving any masterful resolve out of the matter. And that's exactly it. Even people that have won awards, WCB intervenes and the people don't actually get the award. You're an injured worker. We need to put this into a trust that we, the WCB, will operate, and we'll slip you monthly money. And we'll pay for your medications, and we'll pay for all this other stuff.
Maybe.
But you won't touch that money. They're not going to allow you to have it. Because the way they've set the scheme up, if you were to take control of that money, that means that you can organize something and you can control things, which also means you can work. So have you been lying to us all these years? You see how the scam works? The way they've got it written is if you are able, then you're lying about your injury. And you keep saying you can't work because of the severity of your injury. And so that's why you'll never get your money all at once, because you would have to be in control of it. And if you can actually do that, then you can actually go to work. And if you can actually go to work, well, now we, the WCB, might sue you and take all your money away from you and cut you the hell off.
Anyway?
Because you're lying to us, right?
And you get nothing.
And you get nothing. And so at the end of the day, as Ralph mentioned, we have a lot of experiences over the years trying to work with people, and we found out that that wasn't a viable avenue to pursue. We came to the conclusion that we had to create a small little crew, and we needed to proceed. There were a number of other people involved in the early on, but as time went on, different reasons, they're not here anymore. And one of the main reasons is they can't interfere with what we're doing. Everything we're doing, no one else, as far as we know,
it takes a lot of self-control to be able to do this, and even with our little crew here, the three of us, we've had problems with our own self looking after that.
Yeah.
Where I've even lost it here in the last, and I don't normally do that.
And it's hard, and to talk emotion, just think that we all had families, when this was happening. We all had children growing up. We wanted to give our kids what we could give them. We wanted swimming lessons, dance lessons, or anything like
Holidays.
that. Yeah, take them on a holiday once in a while. In my lifetime and that of my children, the only holiday we ever went on was I was blown up and burned. And we went out to Vancouver so I could heal properly. And so the children came along because they didn't have a choice. And that was our holiday.
And how old were they?
Time, yeah, they were fairly young.
That is actually pre-memory. I've seen pictures. We would have been like 3. I would have been 3. Dylan might have been 1.5 or 2.
In the end, when you're that
Dylan was in
young,
diapers.
Yeah.
so you never
Brielle
really
was
had
2
a
years
holiday.
old because I got blown up in '94 and she was born in '92.
Yeah.
Our holiday
And
used to
that's
be
when we went,
I'd take them out to Lake St. Anne.
And that's it.
Yeah, and then come back
The
again.
bottom line is we can't function. We're actually, the whole Meredith system was designed, that Ralph mentioned earlier. The Meredith system in 1913 was designed so injured workers would not be a burden upon themselves, their families, or society. The way the system was set up is the workers pay into a fund, workers get hurt, and the fund will in turn take care of you. At the very same time, because they did that, you're not legally allowed to sue anyone. If you're an injured worker, you cannot sue anyone. Now, that law from 1913, believe it or not, stayed in place all the way up to November 2003. And I believe it's November 20th, if I'm right on the date, but I know it's November 2003, that a case out of Edmonton called the Thomas Shuchuk case, S-H-U-C-H-U-K, first name Thomas, anybody can look it up, and you'll see that he felt he was abused by the WCB, and so he sued the WCB to lose its jurisdiction, because there's only one way in the world to get away from WCB in Alberta, and you must prove that they did something vile and malicious against you. And Mr. Shuchuk did prove that. And the case ends up going to the Supreme Court of Canada, and Mr. Shuchuk wins. And what Mr. Shuchuk won, and when he won, this is for every working man, woman, and child in this country. And what Thomas Shuchuk won was the right to sue. You see, the Meredith law says that you get compensation, you cannot sue. No matter what happened, you get your compensation and rehabilitation and such, and that prevents you from suing, because back in those days, like 1913 for example, how many people could sue an employer? Nobody had the money, and it was wiping families. So families are hard up as bad as it was. You're even more hard up trying to get all this money together to in fact sue anybody, right?
That's been through history.
Yeah.
But people can look all of this up. What we're trying to say is, over the years, we collected all this evidence against all these entities, every one of them, including the police services, and we have no place to go with it. And we had no money to get to the Supreme Court. Can't do that. And in turn, like Ralph said, it was, as a matter of fact, it was April, or March, I should say, my apologies, of 2016, when Ralph's dad, Herb, came up with the idea.
After he read partial story about what your dad was.
So I wrote a partial biography of Ralph, of his life leading up to 2007, when Ralph stopped dealing with the board. And so people are clear about this. Mr. Teed actually still has an ongoing active claim with the WCB. He's the only one. He actually has a pension from the WCB. He is forever in contact with them, and they are forever going to be in contact with him, even though they screwed him. And that appeal from 2007, see, the reason Ralph never continued with the appeals past 2007 is by 2007 we had amassed enough evidence to prove there is no way in the world that he's ever going to get a fair, independent, impartial process. He will never get a fair hearing. You're on a merry-go-round to nowhere. As soon as you win, they'll come up with another excuse to put you back into appeals, and around and around and around you go. And this merry-go-round does not have any
And my
ending.
file will show this. That's where your dad is using as the grounding file.
Yeah,
This is to show the circle to nowhere. And then what happens is Peter comes in, and he joins the circle. And now your dad,
And now with
he's
Peter,
in there.
as mentioned, Peter can legally be in two places at the same time.
He's magical, Peter.
Based on evidence submitted by the WCB Special Investigations Unit and their senior director people. And now it is in affidavit format. And now an affidavit is a document that you swear to. These are legal documents, and if you are found to have lied in one of these documents, you can be held in contempt and you could face criminal charges of various kinds as well. You most certainly can be sued. Now, in Peter's case, even in 1998, he was on the Leslie Primo show, and they described it to the whole province, all the people that listened to the Leslie Primo show. And that was simply that Peter can be legally in two places at the same time. He presented the affidavits to Leslie Primo to prove that he can be
call
legally
him
in two
Mr.
places
Magical.
at the same time.
Your dad over here
Now there's
is
further
Mr. Miracle, and I'm Mr. Nobody.
There's the the law in Alberta states that you can't even have a compensation claim unless your employer files an accident report. And in Peter's case, there's no such files. Now, we've even used lawyers to go after WCB to hand over those pieces of Peter's files, and the WCB refuses. And we know the reason they refuse is because these files don't exist. And how so? If the files don't exist, how can this guy even have a claim to begin with? And so on and so forth. And even though he has this bogus claim, how can he be in two places at the same time, legally be in two places? So he took it to the police commission, and the privacy commissioner with that very argument. It is humanly impossible to be in two places at the very same time. And the affidavits that were sworn to, and they're all legal and everything, one affidavit says that Peter was inside the WCB building on a specific day and time, having a meeting with the Special Investigations Unit and the case manager staff. But the SIU surveillance reports, which were also sworn in affidavit, for that very same day and time, Peter's shown out walking the street 67 blocks away from the WCB building. And that's why we say Peter can be in two places at the same time, because the footage all is date, time identical. It's what you see is different, but the date and time is identical. Somebody edited this and made a mistake.
Hence, Mr. Magical.
And they were caught.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so the
And
way
your dad, after what our doctor, has described him, he's the miracle.
Yeah.
now we are, because
And I'm the
of
nobody.
damage
'Cause
sustained.
all my constitutional rights and all that stuff as a native person. Yeah,
It's all gone.
so
And they took it away on
including the
purpose.
family part of it there.
And
Yeah.
the whole game here is we will either suffer out and die, we'll commit suicide, we'll overdose, or we'll use medical assistance in dying. But either way, we're no longer a problem for any of these people. And at the very end, if we still survive, we'll get a AISH. We'll end up on AISH or one of the other social programs that the taxpayer pays for. And this is the thing. I know for sure back in 2003, I believe there was 30 or 32,000 people that were on assured income for severely handicapped in Alberta. And if you look at the number today, I believe I saw it in the newspaper the other day. And it's either 55 or 65,000. It's one of the two. Even if we use the number 55, that's almost 20,000 more people are on AISH. And that's just one program. Look how many other programs there are. All we're saying is all of these funds, everything is being downloaded.
And then
So-
the people on AISH aren't getting properly funded.
None of them are, and everybody knows
Absolutely
that.
not.
So I mean, is it the download, or is it because they just don't want to pay AISH people? But I'm perceiving that because there's such a huge download of injured workers that normal AISH patients, they don't get it. They don't get proper payment because of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's all a scam. And very quickly, we're not going to get too far off topic, but since Ralph brought that up, I do want people to understand how crazy this is, what goes on in Alberta here, because Ralph is an existing claim. Everything I state, if it's not recorded, it is in his record, and his file is still open to this day, which means that no one can destroy anything, nor anything at all related to this claim. It has to stay open at all times, and nothing can be touched. It all has to remain there, right? And that's the point of how he was treated, right? So, let's get back to what ends this game. In 2016, we're trying to figure out, so let's be clear, for 44 years the PCs were in power. All the evidence we had up until that moment, up until that election in 2015, was all about the PCs and the civil service and the police at the time, right? And all the different entities, but at that time. And then suddenly, the NDP come out of nowhere, and they win the election.
We thought a miracle took place.
Yeah, we actually did.
This is
In the
it.
back of my mind, though, knowing Rachel Notley personally,
Yeah, we were worried.
and having evidence directly against her, it was questionable what might happen, but we had no choice. We had to engage this government and give this government the opportunity to respond. And we did, and I have some extremely condescending, slough you off, get lost and go blah blah in the wind from the existing NDP government. They could care less about anything. They could care less that I can prove beyond any doubt that doctors can destroy Netcare files at will, and your computer system won't catch it. You won't see it. When they ask me how I can prove such a thing, I simply say to them that when you listen to the audio recording of the event, you can hear what was recorded into the computer. You can hear the computer shut down, and then an hour later when the doctor comes in, you can hear him ask me for the doctor's name. And he very clearly says that I need that so I can open up your file that was created an hour or so ago to see what notes are there. So it proves that the file was saved. And what I'm trying to say, anybody that knows anything about computers knows that once this file has been saved once, it's in the system. And in Alberta, the law does state very clearly that once a document enters the system, it cannot ever be destroyed, ever. It cannot be deleted, ever. The law says you can make copies, amendments, and so on, but you can never, ever delete these documents.
Or you can hide it.
And as I say, in my case, we can prove that the documents, some X amount of documents disappeared. When I go to the Privacy Commissioner's office, they don't have jurisdiction over such a thing. And Netcare is controlled by the Health Minister, who told me to get lost. So you can see that we can accumulate tons of evidence against these people, but it doesn't do you any good unless you have some place to go with it.
There we go.
And so in March of 2016 was quite a year of discovery, but in March of 2016, Herb's dad, the old retired veteran from the
Ralph's
military,
dad, who is named Herb.
Yeah.
Okay.
My apologies if I said
Yep.
it wrong. But Herb came up with the idea that, listen, when I was in the military, he says, I was an MP, a military policeman. And we did have jurisdiction to investigate certain civil matters, civilians, so to speak. And but he wasn't sure exactly, it's been a long time for him, but he knew that they are a police service, for one.
And they had to know all the
they
law,
do
every law there was.
fair and honest
Military,
investigation.
civil,
Yeah.
and
And
whatever.
being an MP himself, it's an avenue that he believes it would be fair, because it's a brotherhood. And so he, as a brother, money has been stolen from him, money that was used with Ralph, Peter, and I. And the reason that Herb is filing this criminal complaint. So what happens is Herb says, check it out, call the military police. So I do. And at first they didn't want to talk to me at all, but after persistence, shall we say, there turns out to be 6.5 hours of conversation, pre-screen is what I call it, because they're hitting me with all these different questions from all different angles, but I was successful in answering all of them. And because I was, I'm finished with the MPs at that point, and they make an appointment for me with the federal Crown Prosecutor and the Federal Prosecutorial Service. About 2
But
weeks.
there were steps you had to go. You had to go to the desk, the sergeant.
Oh yeah, we had to work our way through
Yeah.
the whole thing.
And then you
but
got put into
It took
this.
6.5 hours of interviews to get through everybody, to actually get permission to speak to
The
federal.
captain. Yeah, there it was.
To speak to we made our way up to the captain who runs military police in Western Canada. He makes all final decisions on investigations. And then that's when I met the federal Crown Prosecutor. And so, just to be clear, before I say what he says, the reason that we're here and the reason we're going to continue to move forward is because individually we will be destroyed. And that is the history of the injured worker of Alberta. They divide and conquer, and then you would be wiped out, and that's the end of the story. But in our little crew, I tied Ralph's file to Peter's file to my file. And then everything I speak, everything I talk about, every word we say is no embellishment because it's all recorded. And there's no need for us to embellish or twist or exaggerate anything. The fact remains that we did catch all of these people doing all of these things that we say. We've just never had a fair and honest place to take it. That's one issue. Number two is, individually, We may or may not have had a good battle, so to speak, before we were slaughtered, but as a collective, they can't touch us now. Nobody can touch us at all, legally or otherwise. They can kill us, and that is their only recourse now. They can't take anything away from us that have not been taken already. Our families have been taken away from us, our lives, our health, everything has been taken away. So short of killing us, there's nothing left that they can do. By being in a position like this, we have no fear. We have nothing left to worry about. So there's nothing to be fearful about. We need to focus and concentrate and proceed with what we're doing. And what we're doing is we're going to follow through with permissions that I was gained through the conversation with the federal Crown prosecutor after speaking to the military police. And what we're saying is we've been pre-screened and we have green to go. We have permission that the argument that we have proposed is solid and it has merit. And it has enough merit that we have guarantees that everything submitted will be investigated. Now where any of this leads, we have no idea. And what the outcome's going to be, we have no idea. We're not the police, judge, and jury or otherwise. We're just simple, humble men who got railroaded when we got injured at work, and we never received timely and accurate medical care, and it destroyed our lives and that of our families.
And those of our friends,
And
because we have many injured workers and those that are the family members, all people that we've come close to, friends of, but we had to walk away from everybody.
Because they would drag us down.
Yep.
And they'd stab us in the back. And everybody would do everything to try and advance
Because their lives are
files
falling
at
apart
any-
and they're hanging on.
Yeah.
And this
When
is
you're
what
drowning,
happens.
what do you do?
Yeah.
That's right. But to try and move forward with a case like this, we can't include these people.
Yeah.
There's no way that they can be included because
It took a special crew to come together.
there's no way that this can work and function with these people interrupting all the time.
And the
causing-
crazy thing is
causing
all
problems.
things that did happen, and the way that all the investigation and the fact that there is no way out of here. If anybody else would have got all this information,
Do you need us to take a break, Dad?
No, we'll carry on.
just like your dad, Peter, maybe somebody else. But the fact was that my dad happened to be a veteran who served the country, military police yet on top of it. And then them calling, like when the board put it in writing that all Native people are criminals, that touched
That
him.
just blew a gasket because Herb
He
Teague
never heard that
is
before.
an Aboriginal.
Yeah.
Herb Teague spent his military career as a military policeman.
How many military natives
So for him-
were in the country?
Yeah.
For him to put his life on the line every day he went to work for the service of his country, and for him to find out that his family is being abused and through racism, that was
And he
pretty
lost
hard for
all
that
his
man.
money on this?
It's hard for him to stomach that.
Yeah.
And it's hard for him to understand that all the monies that he had loaned Ralph to fight the project or to fight against this corruption was all taken away, and it may not come back. It just drove him insane. And that's why he himself started thinking of avenues that might help us, and he's the one that came up with go to the MPs and see what they say.
Yeah.
And so we did present the right argument. Not at first. And I will admit on tape, and I don't care who listens to it, they beat me down so bad in the beginning that I couldn't stop crying. They just pounded me right into the dirt. The MPs did.
Yeah, I remember you talking to me about this when it
Yep.
happened.
And I fought back on behalf of us. And then I focused and started hitting them with evidence that cannot be disputed in any way, shape, or form. And you sure as hell will not hear them when you listen to the tapes.
Everything
You won't hear them
changes.
laughing at me no more. Very quickly I started gaining ground. And then at the end I'm finishing off with the captain who runs all investigations in Western Canada. And he made the final decision. He struck an agreement with me on behalf of our crew of what they intend to do with what I'm going to be presenting here coming up. What we're going to be presenting, right? And the reason that they're going to do it is twofold. One, because Mr. Teed is who he is. Herb Teed, he has medals to prove that he did an honorable a job filled
Serving.
with valor.
Yeah.
Service. And he did he was honorably discharged with medals. And his career was all military police work. And so he's inbred that these people will do a fair job. And so once they said they would, then we pursued it just a little bit further. And I went to the federal authorities to verify that the military police have exactly the same training, expertise, resources, and so on and so forth that the RCMP would have, that the Edmonton Police Service, Calgary Police Services have. How do they rate? And they rate equal. They are an equal service. So we win the game here coming up soon. Ralph and I and Peter, especially Peter and I, we're not going to live to see the outcome. There's no way the damage done is going to allow us to. But we are going to file the criminal complaint on behalf of Ralph Teet's dad, Herb. And Ralph will go down first. He's the base case. He starts in 1985. Peter goes down second because his case starts in 1991. And then I come down as cleanup because my case begins in 1994. And then when it's all put together, as I say, there's no disputing what happened. It was just a matter if we ran into corruption and greed and deceit and dishonesty within Alberta. And because of the Constitution, we were trapped here. And by Mr. Teet coming up with that idea, and by us proposing the proper legal argument to tie all of this, every entity, every person has to be tied together for this to work. And we do have we have everything in order. We have two of everything. So every example that we will present has a backup. And there is a reason why we designed this case like this. And for people that pursue it, anybody can look it up on Google. And as I say, Ralph and others have used, the word conspiracy and stuff. I'm not going to use it.
I don't know if I never used that one. I believe that this is not conspiracy.
We most certainly have been tortured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I call it torture.
Yeah.
I call it legal, legislative torture.
Yeah.
They
Because
legally legislated to torture us.
And in truth, he's right. And we can't prove he's right. Because as we mentioned earlier on the tape, we found out that these people that were withholding, editing, and destroying our files were doing so with government approval.
Yeah.
And there's no way that the government or anyone else can say that we didn't do it, and nor did we give them permission. I mean, all of this is written. And not only that, we've got them all trapped on tape throughout this whole matter. And so at the end of the day, coming up here soon, we're going to make this submission to the MPs, and we're going to get one thing that we've never gotten before, and that's a fair, honest, independent, and impartial review of what happened here.
Yeah.
And now, I want to conclude with one other thing, because lots of people that listen to these kind of audios...
And just so you know, I still have one question to ask Ralph. I only ever asked you a question.
Okay. Yeah. The concern is then that... and now I lost what I was going to say.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay, I'll have to think about it. Now go ahead and ask Ralph your question.
Great. Ralph, it's my understanding, based on conversations with Dad and just kind of listening to you talk, that you call yourself an activist, or that you have done activism, and I'm wondering why you do that, because Dad doesn't. He doesn't look at himself that way.
I could say maybe I was an activist.
Yeah.
Because what happened with myself is, in order for me to get like the whole thing, the gist of all what happened, it starts as myself as being as a young person. Like I say, all of us, we lived. When we talk about our stories, we've had some pretty rough upbringing and different things that have taken place in our lives, But not everybody kind of comes out of all this stuff.
Yeah.
Somehow the three of us, we did. Like we've had so many experiences in life that would take a lot of people completely apart before our accidents. Never mind what happened after.
Yeah.
But as a person of native culture, but I'm also mixed blood. But my attachment to my existence has always been my native culture. I mean, I think it's prevalent in everything that I do.
Yeah.
And as a child, we were always told to be very quiet. Don't talk about it. Don't tell anybody. But I like this is part of who I am. I know, like this is who I am. I'm going to talk about it. Well, I didn't understand. You're a kid. You don't listen to parents. My mom was trying to protect us. The 60 scoop was going on.
Yeah.
The thing that I remember now, though, thinking back here, the thing that saved us from the 60 scoop was the fact that my dad was actually in the military and even serving at that time. So for them to touch him, or us, they would have had to deal with him, knowing he was military police. So I think maybe that's kind of the reason why we got left alone. And then it was I don't know what it's something I grew up with, this inner attachment, pride, whatever you want to call it, with the native culture. So I've always believed that there was an honor system. And from the time I was a child, that there was always this honor system of brotherhood. I couldn't find it. Even in my own culture, I was looking for it dearly. And many years of being stabbed in the back, growing up. And you gotta remember, I'm not an educated person. I had dyslexia when I was growing up. The schooling part wasn't really here in Alberta.
Yeah.
I'd gotten a little help in BC before little story short, I was living in BC for a few years after my dad had come back. He was in service in the 67 Egypt time there when they had the war.
Yeah.
Well, he just about got killed there. But he came back there, and my parents had already separated. But we'd been living with my mom for a number of years, and he'd been servicing in Ottawa. That could be where he got involved with national security stuff too. But then he went out to BC. We went out there for a visit, and we stayed out there for a couple of years, which was great for me. That was the best part of my whole life, was that time in BC. And we had to come back to Alberta again. But it was my dad's service, I believe, that actually ended up protecting us from the grab. So my pride in the native culture had to do with this brotherhood that I felt there was at one time, and but not finding it. I've gone through many different spiritual experiences. I was brought up as a Roman Catholic and the strict way of that, and that didn't work for me. Too many things were not being told to me when I questioned what was going on. I tried my native culture, and yet I couldn't find an elder until many years ago. There were many years in my life, actually until I met your dad. I actually met Bill pretty close to the same time.
Yeah. Bill Wooden is his name.
Yeah, who became my elder. So I didn't have an elder until I was much in my, I believe I was in my 40s then.
Yeah.
Well into adulthood.
Yeah, so I've been crawling through all these different experiences, trying to learn as I go. All my experiences had to be that I had to have my foot in there, and hopefully I could get back out before anything serious happens. And then I'd gotten my foot into this injured worker thing, like I was deep into it.
But to be clear though,
Your dad.
when Herb got back to Alberta in '94,
Yeah,
Ralph wasn't Ralph wasn't advocating yet.
no.
Herb
I was a
military
sufferer.
man with a lot of discipline.
Yeah.
And when he saw his son laying there after a surgery and,
Potent.
and complaining about not getting treated properly and so on and so forth, it was actually Herb that kicked his ass and told him to get out there and find the avenue to solve this problem.
With my sister
And
braids.
quit sitting here
Yeah.
sniveling about it. Do something about it. And that's the type
Who
of
else
person
is out there? There's
Herb
got to be
is.
more people. It can't be just you going through this.
And
Yeah.
that's why Ralph went out from that moment on. It's because of Herb. And see, that's the other reason why we're able to file this criminal complaint now. Because we have an avenue to the military police through Herb. Herb had his pension and he had savings and everything after the war. He owned a store until his wife passed, and he decided to come back to Ralph and the family and the grandchildren and live out his life with them. But he's the one that kicked Ralph to the curb, and
We became very close when he came back.
Yeah.
As a child, I wasn't really around him even that much. Even when we
He'd
were
gone
in
all the
BC,
time.
he was in the military there. He's busy or whatever, and I was in the mountains.
yeah.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, Herb began putting in large sums of money. Ralph
Oh, yeah.
bought recording equipment and paper and anything and everything at the time. When he joined into workers groups and met different people, they tried different things, and things cost money. And Ralph was supplying a lot of it, and it all came from Herb.
Well,
And
yeah,
that's the key
it
to
was
this
him
thing.
pushing me in, because I'd won my file before I met him, before he came back. I'd won, and then they cut me off and
Yeah.
threw me back into.
Which began the merry-go-round to nowhere.
Yeah, well, I was already on it and didn't realize it.
Yeah.
But I winning and not winning and then winning and not winning again. This was going on. and a constant flux in my file. And I don't know if anybody else has ever experienced it, but I was under medical review almost every 6 months of my life. And the gauntlet that they put me through was just...
And remember, Ralph was injured in February of '85, and Herb never came back to Alberta until the summer of '94. So it
where
was,
I just won and
Yeah.
then got cut off again.
Yeah.
immediately, and Herb witnessed that.
And I had to move from one place to another to another. So, like, I just moved out in, like, when the whole thing from moving from the north, we were put into, the whole family was put into a flux. We were moving, every time they cut me off, I'd win, I'd get cut off, I'd win, I'd have to move. And the kids, oh, they went to hell.
Well, and just to interject here, like, you were saying you had to go under medical review every 6 months or so. Would you say you were moving about that often? Like, it was fairly cyclical?
I would say I would give myself a year and a half in most places.
Yeah, and just, like, from my own experience,
Yes.
that's exactly what we
seven
did.
times
we
in
know.
8 years.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
every, like, 8 to 13 months, I'd say we were moving.
And we had to keep moving because all resources were expunged for 2 reasons. One, trying to maintain any kind of pain control, and then number 2, we have to live,
Yeah.
right?
Gee.
And that caused a lot of different conflicts and stuff.
Part of the reason why I advocated, though, is because I had been able, even at 94, I was, in my own little fight, and I've been able to win benefits, and then getting cut off, and then having to appeal again, knowing I'm going to win. I knew this because of the way they were messing me around here. But what I'd seen was all these injured workers. Nobody was winning.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell's going on? I'm not educated, and I won my file. And all these people, nothing. They're all injured, thrown to the street. And this really caught me, like, it just took me down like a ton of bricks, all the suffering going on around me. And then I'd gotten involved with the Alberta Injured Workers. I stayed with them for a little while, and then I realized that there was way too much control with what they were doing, and injured workers weren't going nowhere, and all they were doing was hollering and
Yeah,
screaming.
you can't get into injured workers to do
So we
anything
started our
together.
own little group, the provincial injured workers. But the board we put together kind of worked, so. And even then we had problems because Frank ended up quitting because he didn't get along with one other person, and
Just
there was
boiled back
conflict.
again, and injured workers can't work together.
So we put a bunch of people together in one room, and all we got was screaming and hollering, and we tried to get control of this so that we could get some stories and get people to, like, let's get it in writing, and let's ask the same questions, and get, gather material. Put your file collectively together, and that we could read it to show, the patterns here, right?
Yeah.
And we couldn't get it happening. I met your dad in '99 when we did the protest. We were in the tent. I still remember.
And to be clear,
That was the tent city, was it?
Well, it wasn't really a tent city. It was a couple tents there, right?
Yeah.
in front of WCB, they kind of they really didn't want us there.
so the way it truly goes is Ralph's partner at the time, that's Frank Pagnotta, he changed himself to the front doors so nobody can come in and out. And while he's doing that, Ralph's setting up tents and stuff.
I remember you being excited about, like, I remember you coming home one day.
Well, the
It must
reason-
have been the day you found out that Frank had been chained, and you were so excited to tell Mum about what was going on.
Well, and the reason was, of course, and this also helps explain both Ralph's and our cases, and the racism that he encountered. Is proven
was our
the day
first
we
meeting.
met,
Yeah.
because it was a Monday that I went to the WCB, okay, in '99. Now, 4 days before that Monday, my doctor said I need an MRI. So the day after he said I need it, I got it. And this Monday now, I'm coming to the WCB to go over the results of what was seen on the MRI. And that's when I come up to the building and these guys are protesting. And they got their tents and everything up, and then Ralph was out there with a clipboard wanting people to sign the petition. Its history does show, I end up getting all those petitions, and it's a massive stack of them, that they had submitted. And the irony of of who we are,
That's funny.
it was kind of wild because his dad Herb had been there that morning. A gentleman named Louis Bachman had been there that day.
Our brother.
And yeah, another brother, and this one died. And I'm going to give you the documents to show you who this man was and how him and Ralph knew each other and everything. It's all well written. There's some articles written from the Edmonton Sun. Jeremy Loomy is the reporter that wrote all this stuff.
And you got to understand, I haven't even read all this stuff.
Yeah,
all the
Ralph
years
hasn't
it's
even
been
seen
there,
it.
I haven't even read it all.
But we're going to show it to you, and you'll see it, you know, the depth of the hurt, the pain, the sufferance when you read something. Because this is a professional writer, reporter. Jeremy does a pretty good job when he tells the story, right? And he's very, you know, he's a professional.
He was a
that's what
friend.
he gets paid
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
And so he does explain a lot in these 6 stories about what happened to Ralph, what happened to Louise, and what happened to many other people. And at the end of the day, we got to stop that. Everything has to stop. Because like I say, in 2016, from 1994 to 2016, nobody sees broken and crushed vertebrae. But what I want people to understand is picture in your mind trying to raise a family with this kind of physical damage and not getting any assistance from anybody, more or less any medication. It was complete hell for me and my family because the pain was absolutely through the roof. Anybody that knows anything about medical, when you crush vertebrae in and of itself, that would put most people down. Start breaking ligaments, tendons, muscles, and everything else, right? And then we come to Ralph's file now. And it turns out that Ralph and I have the same doctor now because this gentleman saved my life. If it wasn't for this doctor intervening here recently, I'd be dead right now, and that is not even up for debate. For 2 reasons. One, the medical condition was killing me. I was being poisoned. And then number 2, because of the absolute gross nature of the severity of the pain and screaming out all the time and it's just deforming a person's body and on, I engaged MAID, medical assistance in dying, and I was supposed to die on January 31st of this year. And then I met this doctor, and based on what he said, I called it off because he said he could help me, or he would try.
Yeah.
But so at least he's going to try. And so that's why we called off the suicide, legal suicide, call it whatever you want. I was going to stop the pain. I can't deal with it no more. I'm not getting any more treatment. And my family would be better off without me, you know, being the burden.
I don't find you a burden, Daddy-O.
All right. Anyway, the same thing applies for Ralph. Exactly the same thing. He was a burden on his family, and he's had thoughts just like mine. Everything's the same. We go to Peter, exactly the same. You know, families.
You got to understand, like, we're not educated people, so part of the miracle of all this is we're not trainable. Schooling itself today is part of the training. Sad to say.
Well, and sorry to cut you off, I dropped out of high school.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to complete it for many of the same
Exactly.
reasons, right?
He couldn't get proper medical care. They wouldn't give it.
So
You know,
what
so is it a coincidence
happens?
my kid can't get proper medical care? Your kids can't get proper medical care? Is this a coincidence? Peter, the only reason he doesn't associate himself, well, he doesn't have kids.
Yeah. But he couldn't get medical care.
But
Yeah.
both you and I, we've had our children have been under surveillance by the authorities
Oh, man. It's just,
because
it's
they believe that as long
relentless.
as they can find the kids, they can find you.
Yeah.
And yet, not in my family's case, but in Ralph's case, his kids did come home. It is on the record.
Yeah.
That and
Feared.
his kids, psychologically, put that in your mind and think about it a little bit. That we're talking little kids, and I'm just going to say between the ages of 7 and 13. And they come home and tell Dad that somebody's following us. And we don't know what the hell is going on, but somebody keeps
Well,
following
Shannon
us all
also
the time and stuff.
said, and that's when she broke in and said that there's somebody following her when she's driving my vehicles. And that's when I knew there
turned
was
out to
somebody
be
around.
true.
Yeah.
They were. And
Yeah.
the end result of all of that was that to find Ralph, they hadn't seen him in a while and they didn't know where he was. So follow the children. And it was freaking out his kids. And it was causing mental issues with the children while they're being hunted.
Well, they were already
Because they
under
knew-
mental stress because of the way we were living.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But they knew they were being hunted, they just didn't know why.
Well,
And Ralph
and
couldn't protect him.
And I didn't
Exactly.
find out until 1994 when FOIP laws were actually working for us. I was able to get my file before they were able to edit everything. Now the native thing, everything else come out all over that. But also what happened was it showed that they were investigating me and that they had hired this outfit to watch me. And in this file, they made me out to be a drug runner. And this caught me just like a sack of hammers. Like, what
Like all
the
injured
hell?
workers, and I should clarify this too, because we're injured workers and there's thousands of us.
Yeah.
There's two issues in Ralph's file. So Ralph's file starts in February '85, and now him and I meet October 18th, 2002. Well, the first time 1999, that was just a brief meeting, but the day he came to our house,
Yeah.
do you remember? That was October 18th, 2002.
It was the phone call. That phone
But
call, I
all
was
of these-
laid out sick. I was done. I was, my back, I had so many knives in the back there already. I found out that everybody stabbed me and that there was nobody left. And your dad phoned.
And the reason I phoned him is because I'd shown Leslie Primo that tape. I gave it to her to listen. Your mom told me to do it. And so I did give it to her. When they took my hearing away, without having a hearing, they rendered the wipeout decision when I had Bill Bonner as my representative. And then the hearing disappears.
We
and all
talked,
that.
what, 3-4 hours
It
more?
was- Yeah, we
I
talked
can't
for quite
remember
a
what it
while
was.
on the phone.
I was
That
so
the day
freaking
he
sick there,
actually came out.
I was just laying in the bed, but I had to keep talking to your dad.
But all I'm saying is when we met, he gave me those. He came to our home with duffel bags, and there was
I knew it
there
as
was
soon as I
audio.
talked to him that see, his experience, what he was talking to me about, the fact that he actually broke down. I broke down when my original doctor laughed at me when I first got injured. When you told me about that story, I was going to mention that earlier. When you told me the story about laughing, right away it clicked. And I remember the guy's name too, Casey. I got a bad memory. But Dr. Casey laughed at me when I told him, I'm in serious friggin' pain. And I said, I can touch my toes, but I said, it's coming back up. And he just laughed at me, there's nothing wrong with you.
And
Go
so
back to work.
Ralph gives me all his files and all the audio in 2002. And then that began the Odyssey. And that's what led to where we are today. Because what I did is I went through all of his audio, and we're talking, it's taken years to do all these things, and I went through all of his files too. And now, the ironic part about Ralph's file is that I'm the one that told him 2 discoveries that I made that no one seemed to have noticed.
Not even me.
Not even him. No one noticed it. But in August of 1985, Ralph actually sees an orthopedic surgeon that details exactly what Ralph needs for treatment, which turns out to be the exact treatment he finally does get in '94. So why did 9 years go by before he gets?
Well, I didn't get
treatment?
exact because they couldn't do what they could have
Well,
done
they tried
back then.
to. And so the point of, as we said, with crushed nerves, or nerves that are possibly going to be crushed, you have to insert a metal insert before the joint space narrowing closes the gap. So the report's written just a few months after date of injury. If Ralph would have got the treatment that the guy described of putting the insert in, right then and there, then he would probably not be, and he'd probably still be working. And it's very likely he would be. But because he didn't get that sleeve put in, that's one issue. But the other issue is no one ever saw that report. Like, I never even found that report until 2004 or 5, give or take, maybe 2006, is when I found that report and questioned him as to why you're even in this position when they knew all along what was wrong and what needed to be done. But somehow the report disappeared. Because not only did Ralph have lawyers and advocates and all these other people, because Herb was putting up the money to help Ralph hire all these professionals to work his file and let's get the truth on the table and prove it all and all that, they all missed it too. And then later, there's another piece that they missed and that nobody noticed either. And that's where the institutional or systemic racism, you can call it whatever you want, but racism is racism is racism.
Yeah.
He has a caseworker and a quality assurance advisor who sets up a conference call between Ralph's old employer and the insurance company. And this caseworker, it's insane. And this is what I posted about Mr. Teed.
That's what my dad-
Are you talking about Mr. Teed as in Herb or Mr. Teed as in Ralph?
Ralph.
Okay.
And then now I posted in 2007 for the whole world to see. But what happens is the website very quickly gets attacked. 350 porn sites attacked the frickin' website. And at the time I didn't know enough and we did have antivirus. You know, the story is these people knew what they were doing. And I didn't know how to defend myself at the time, electronically. And so they wiped out the website that was describing all of these events to the whole world. And so we shut it down, but up until that point, I had done a 26-and-a-half-year summary on Ralph Teed, and it was printed off because Ralph wanted a copy. And one day, Herb, in 2016, heard about it and asked Ralph to give him that copy. So when Herb reads the story I wrote about Ralph, he will discover two things that no one ever knew about. One, the surgeon report from '85 that could have saved him and his family from this entire nightmare. But somehow this report disappears. The report was in the control of the WCB. So you can
We know how it all works now.
yeah.
There's what they call a red file, and now what they call is a floating database.
Yeah, they hide files that they don't want you to see, and then once your appeals are over, these files suddenly reappear.
And then they call it was lost in the forever desk of the case manager. This drawer that she has is like 3 stories deep, and you have to use electrical pillar thing there to bring all the
There's
paperwork
tons
up.
of details that we're going to be
What
showing
we're
the
just
police.
joking because this is the common excuse that they use.
Yeah.
They lost it in the file in the case manager's desk.
But remember what we said before. Everything these people are doing, they have good, legislative approval to do it.
Yep.
And it's a sick, demented, and very repulsive system when you realize that your own government has designed a system to take you out and to make sure that you do not.
And why do they allow the
benefits that you
WCB to
need
do this?
or otherwise.
Because they gave them permission to hide it all. They're under a contract. Nobody can talk about what's going on there. This is
Well, that's what we
perfect
talked
way to
about
break
earlier.
laws,
Yeah.
and nobody will know about it.
And to verify that as well, just so we're clear for your tape, Mr. Lukasik and I got in a very heated argument, and I told him that he doesn't know what he's talking about, and
Yeah.
I do, in relation to the time limitation and the gag order thing. And so what he does is he decides to demand, as minister responsible, he demanded the Workers' Compensation Board give me, Anthony Howard Hughes, and himself, Thomas Lukasik, minister responsible, a copy of the actual contract. Now, right before the envelope gets to my home, I end up having one of many heart attacks.
Yeah.
And so I didn't open that package for quite a while thereafter.
Do you remember what year this would have been?
2011.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Was that the first or the second one you had?
that would have been the 5th.
The 5th. Okay.
Yeah,
So I'm
when
way
I got
off
blown
on
up
my
in
memory.
Britain '94, there was 4 of them right there.
Okay, and that's where my confusion was.
Yeah, those don't usually get added in because nobody really considers, but they all happened so fast, and they all happened on the same day.
Yeah.
And they had to keep restarting my heart because it kept shutting down when I got blown up and burnt, and it was simply because of shock.
Yeah,
of
because you go
pain.
into shock
Oh, absolutely.
in that situation, absolutely.
Well, and then having crushed vertebrae, you
At
had
the very
that
same
pain.
time that nobody knew about.
Yeah, that you're unaware
So my
of.
back is broken, and now the reason we figure they got away, it all got masked, was because of the heavy medication that a person was taking for the burns. And I was on my back for a long period of time while I was healing up from the said burns, which also gave time for my back to partially heal. You know, enough that it was
Heal enough.
it held enough that those muscles and whatever else happened with those little muscles that are still left, they were able to hold on to things. In '97, I tried to lift something, and that's when it ripped open. And so we always thought it was a vertebrae had pulled open, right? And it took till 2016, and this is the point that I want the police to investigate, because there is no place in Alberta to get this done, and we can prove that. I want to know how hundreds of professionals can look at x-rays, bone scans, MRIs, CT scans, and the whole 10 yards, for all of those years that I'm dealing with the board and dealing with the Alberta government, which I want to put on the record here, I stopped. I gave up in July of 2016. I can't win this game, and I'm going to die trying, but I am going to die, and I'm going to die soon. And there's nothing I can do about it because I got no help. I have nothing, and so a person will die. And that's why I engaged MAID, and that's why we had a date set and everything, because there's no recourse here.
Yeah.
Right? And but at the end of the day, though,
We're here for something there. I mean, like I say, you know,
yeah, we have
Peter, he's the miracle.
We died many times.
Your dad, you know.
The reason Ralph calls me miracle is Dr. Colliday, our new doctor.
Yeah.
He has told me outright. He calls me his miracle patient because he's never seen a patient sustain such violent spinal column damage.
And still be here.
And I'm still on my feet, for one thing. And I'm still alive, and I'm not paralyzed. And he can't understand how this can be. And so everybody's just stunned by the new discoveries. But what's more important here is how come when I'm dealing with the WCB and the government, that in fact, and I finish in July 2016 and I give up, nobody ever saw this. Because it was September. The actual date is September 7, 2016. So we're talking 2 months after I give up. Because my body's ravaged, I'm mentally ravaged, and the end is here. Right? And then they send me to see a guy that used to play hockey for the Oilers named Dr. Randy Gregg, who's an orthopedic surgeon by trade. Right? And when he does the MRI on me, the first thing he says when he comes walking in the room is, how did you break and shatter all of these vertebrae? And when I asked him, what are you talking about? You obviously have the wrong file. Because, like I said, I got blown up and burnt in 94, re-injured in 97, and I've never worked again. So who the hell are you talking about? And it's me. And that's the point he was making. And that's the first time since the date of injury that I found out that my spinal column was shattered. And that's the literal word for it, when most of the vertebrae are either broken or with two of them completely
Can you imagine
flat,
being
that they don't
happy
even exist?
to find out what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
But
Well,
that exactly happened to me in 94, when they did a procedure called a discogram. They stopped doing this with
This
everybody
is the one
else.
they tried to slide the sleeve in. And they did tell Ralph he's got 50-50 chance it'll go in at this stage because it's so many years after the accident.
Yeah.
But it's that we're
The reason why they saw it, because they wouldn't give me an MRI. He was telling the story about the MRI. He got it. I always have to wait years to get one.
I do apologize, because that's right. The day that Ralph and I met at the WCB in '99 when they started that.
Yeah, you're
thing.
saying it's because you had an MRI to.
Yeah,
go
my
over.
MRI was done, and now I'm here 4 days later to pick it up. But what I didn't finish saying, that Ralph, when I asked him why he's protesting,
My hair just about stood up when he said that.
Ralph had been denied access to get an MRI for 5 years already, leading up to that day. And yet I, a white guy, I was able to get the MRI and the results in 4 days.
Yeah.
And yet for 5 years they wouldn't give it to him, and he has an ongoing
They
claim.
gave me a procedure that nobody even used anymore because it was so friggin' painful to do it. And it was called a discogram. And then they did a myelogram and a CAT scan. And everything showed up just like lippity
But
split.
at the end of the day, as with me, and all the new discoveries that have been made recently, by our new doctor, if he wouldn't have intervened, I was being poisoned by my cardiology team. They will answer for what they've done.
Yep.
We have notified them already that you did poison me, and we don't know why you would have done such a thing to me, but you did target me, and you did do it, and you will get your day to explain to the police when they investigate this as to why you did what you did.
Or your day
So
in the
with Dr.
judge.
Colliday intervening and we shutting down these things and correcting these things, that's why I didn't commit suicide. Because now I got a guy that's telling me he does see everything, but we need to do, certain things have to be done to deal with a complex case. I've got 4 different rare diseases. Ralph has rare diseases. The only reason we have these rare diseases is because our original conditions were allowed to turn chronic. And as I mentioned earlier, no one knows which direction the manifestation will go. But any medical condition, no matter what it is, will go chronic, and then the manifestation happens thereafter but it's ugly, and you don't know which direction it's going to head or what exact damage it's going to
And
do to your body
who's
or
going
otherwise.
to flip the bill?
And who's going to help
Yeah.
you, if anybody? Because there's a lot of people that don't have anybody. And the only reason that we're
That's
here
why
to
we're
tell you
here.
this story is because we teamed up.
Yeah.
See,
And that's the hope
when,
that
when
we've always
Lewis
had.
when Lewis died, I mean, your dad understood. He understood right away.
Yeah, and to
What
be
my
clear, too,
attachment was with Lewis. Your dad and I, we attached right away. Boom. Well, the same thing happened to me with Lewis, but your dad didn't get a chance to meet.
I never did meet Lewis.
I mean,
Luis.
Luis, yeah.
Yeah, he
But
came
Ralph
out.
did.
The last time he came out before he went into the hospital and died, he came out to see me. Literally, I mean, I to
He
this
killed
day,
himself to
it-
go out and
yeah,
he had
and it just
something he wanted to
kills
say
me
to Ralph.
know that this happened.
And the only way to get the message to him was to do it in person.
Yeah.
And so he did leave his house. His wife had customized their house. She became an absolute expert on air quality. And she did spend the money to rebuild their house to fit that lifestyle to try and save her husband's life so he could live longer.
Yeah.
That's without the board helping.
With no help from the board. In his case, the board refused to assist the man and then 2 weeks after he's dead. And so while he's alive, they never helped him at all, never helped her or nothing. And then 2 weeks after he's dead, they decided to give her the money back. Thousands and thousands of dollars and home renovations that she had done in an attempt to save him. They did give her that money back, but they would never honor his claim.
Yeah.
So why did they give her any money in the first place? To give her money, you have to acknowledge that something happened. They would never acknowledge it. And her lawyer, I actually spoke to the person, and
See, that's part of the reason why I fell apart, because Lewis just died. He saw something that he wanted me to go forward with, I seen this point here where I was completely alone. Frank was sick. He was done for.
yeah.
All the rest of the guys, they didn't have the nerve to go forward. And me, I had enough anger and,
Who likes
and
to get
stupidity
that
and
moment?
guts that
Exactly.
I was still going to go forward. I had no way to go with because everybody else I tried to, they got me in, and then I get a phone call out of nowhere.
And so just to be clear, I go to see Leslie Primo. I play her the tape of this person at the WCB laughing at me and taking away my hearing. There is no hearing. We don't need one. We've already decided how your fate's going to go. Without one, blah, blah, blah. So I play the tape for laughing at me to Leslie Primo. Leslie Primo puts me on to a guy named Kevin Becker. Kevin Becker happened to be a man that Ralph had contracted. And Ralph was paying this guy a fortune to adjudicate his file.
It wasn't a real fortune, but you still got to pay when you're
It's a lot
When
of
you're
money.
home, like when you're low income,
you're always
It's-
dealing with having to pay money out all the time.
And
when
so
you're
that's
doing
quickly
this.
how it ended, was that Becker gave me Ralph's phone number and said, you need to talk to Ralph.
Yeah.
So on the morning of October 18th, at 9 o'clock in the morning, I speak to Leslie Primo. Then she gives me Becker's phone number. I phone him, and within 10 minutes of me talking to Leslie Primo, I'm talking to Mr. Teague, Mr. Ralph Teague.
Yeah.
And as soon as we talked on the phone, Ralph knew that something was up. And that's why he didn't have any money. He was extremely depressed at the time. He went to his dad to borrow money to get fuel and everything in his car.
I told him too, and I don't normally tell anybody. I told him I just finished breaking down crying.
Yeah.
I was so depressed,
yeah.
and I don't do that too much.
But it was what he heard me say. He knew that I had things that nobody else did. And he also knew he had things that nobody else had. And so that's why he came to our house that day. And from that day forward, I could see things. We both did. We started making discoveries. We could see what's going on here.
Well, your dad said I had a sixth sense. I always seemed to be able to scribble out of places, or just out of, and sometimes fluke maybe, but where I should have been taken down and out of the game completely, I was able to maneuver and win.
Yeah.
It's just,
He goes to a monastery, right? Ralph does. And
Yeah.
the monastery has a monk. The monk's name is Cujo.
crucial,
right?
crucial.
Cujo.
Yeah.
It sounds like the movie,
Just means
but it's
teacher.
not quite.
Yeah.
Right. But according to what he has to say, I'm a seer.
Yeah.
I see things that no one else can see, and it's our job to make sure that we bring this forward. We cannot die with this. We're not allowed to die with this. It's our destiny that we must show this to the people. The people must understand what we've discovered. They have to become aware of it to put a stop to it. Because if they don't, they're all going to fall victim to it.
And that's why this cannot be just a native thing. Although there's racism involved,
Yeah, that's just one aspect.
It won't help.
Yeah.
See, if we don't help, in my idea of our native culture and growing, it's the European people or the people from the European culture now. It's the ancestors of those people that were racist now, who are changing the whole way everybody thinks.
Yeah, the cycle has to be broken.
So they're breaking the cycle of this, and they're actually helping us native people go forward now, which is just, I see as just beautiful. So what we're seeing here is a whole change of people, minds, everything else coming together. I do believe that this all can be changed into a way that that we can all live together and heal. Based on what we're discovering, we're seeing a hierarchy completely out of control. They are not interested in serving. They are interested in being served. In other words, collect enough money, put it in my account. When I'm retired, voila, I can go down to Florida, the Bahamas, wherever I want. I can live wherever I want now. And the taxpayers have paid for it. So we are not getting people to serve us anymore. The only way to fix this, see, if we can sit here and complain and whatever all we want and holler up and down, but what's the method of changing it?
And that's why they won't do it willingly.
It comes down to the fact that we have a hierarchy that is out of control. Therefore, in a native culture, it is predicted in order for the planet to gain peace, we have to go to the longhouse. Where is that going to start? That's going to start where the longhouse actually was.
But let's not forget one thing.
For the world to gain any kind of peace, and for this this prediction to come true, it's Canada where the longhouse will gain its footing again. And what I say about the longhouse, I'm not talking about going back to old native culture. What I'm talking about is regional representation, where people actually represent the people that they're talking to. Right now, it's party representation, and they're all fighting with each other. Who's right and who isn't? And meanwhile, people are the sheep. They're just following from one crowd to the next, and the cycle that cycle has to be broken. If the whole world wants to change, corporations can be made to work for the people instead of just for a few. Now, at one time, you were not allowed to have huge profits. So therefore, most of the profits went back to the government and whatever back to the people. So if we went back to a lower profit, instead of these huge, big billion-dollar profits that everybody seems to have to need.
What you're saying is capitalism isn't working. And just to be clear, just to support your story, and just so you know, Brielle and the kids in high school, they actually showed the movie Capitalism, and they did explain to the kids what capitalism is and why it doesn't work.
But most of us are complaining, but we have no idea what we're going to change it to.
Yeah.
If you're a spiritual person, it only makes sense. As a native person, we are not allowed to own land. Land is not ours to own. It's for us to look after. And the native people have to get healing enough that they actually get somebody else to understand this. We do not have to need to own land. So in other words, houses, all this could be put into a non-profit housing program. Everybody pays their monthly rent or whatever, and then all the profits go back into the cookie jar and it gets spread out to, for repairs, whatever. The profits or anything left over goes back into the personal kitty jar again, or tax funds or whatever. All these corporations, people can invest, build a corporation. Don't expect so much profit. Expect a good living, maybe more than what everybody else is getting, but once that's all done, then all the money goes back into the cookie jar again, so that everybody gets In other words, like corporations are not working for people. They're working for entities within themselves. And this is what's killing the planet. The new religion, the economy.
When you saw it in the movie Capitalism, it states very clearly that what happens is the government gave those corporations the same rights as a man.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the moment they did that, all hell was broken loose, and it continues to flow to this day. And that's why our case is so important to everybody, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah.
Because our case is still active. And we have one more shot at this to get a fair and honest criminal investigation into what took place here. And we will be the last ones to ever make the attempt to do so.
The only people that
And if
don't
we're
like
not
what we're
successful,
saying,
then the workers are history in this province, and they won't even understand why.
and it doesn't have to be this way. It does,
Yeah.
you know, we can change everything is changeable
But
because everything is man-made.
we asked politely, we gave them evidence, and even Notley's government can't say they were not aware. And nobody cares. Because recently, and this is how sick I believe Rachel Notley and her people truly are. Since the NDP have come to power of Alberta, they made it their mission to investigate every entity. And they're making corrections, they say, to every entity to make sure that these entities, one, are being paid fairly and nobody's cheating, stealing money, and the citizens get what they're supposed to get. So she set up a committee to investigate every entity there is. And just to be clear, and the people that listen to your tape, just so they know how far this game, and I call it a very sick game, but how far this game is being played.
Cover up. It's a cover up.
Notley picked 3 lawyers to represent the panel that was going to investigate the WCB. One of the lawyers took my files while she was working with Covenant Health and put them in her desk and kept them there for many years to prevent me. They were one-of-a-kind documents. I had to have them to move forward, and I would not get access to those said documents. Another person on that file happens to be a lawyer that represented Peter, the other member of our crew, and when he went toe-to-toe with WCB, he was supposed to retrieve the information that we know that WCB doesn't have. And by doing that, that would have exposed what the board was doing right then and there. And everybody would have heard about it. His file would have been fairly dealt with, and so on, but the lawyer walked away. And instead of doing what was right and suing the WCB and forcing them to produce the evidence that legislatively has to be on a file, he instead walks away and refused to help Peter. The third lawyer that was on the panel happens to be associated with Ralph's file because Ralph still has an existing claim with the Compensation Board. Now, as I've said to their government, that was pretty sleazy. And they know our files, they know who's been involved with them, and to call a WCB review, and then you happen to just, what is it? Well, I don't believe in coincidences, but it's pretty sick and demented that the 3 lawyers that were picked happen to be the 3 lawyers that took out Ralph, Peter, and I. How can that even be perceived to be fair? None of it is.
Well, the lawyer didn't take me out, but what he didn't do was...
they interrupted enough with the case that you've never appealed again.
Yeah.
Because you know that you don't stand a chance in hell of ever getting a fair and independent and impartial hearing past
Well, no, once I seen what happened to Frank, then you going there and finding out what they were doing,
this game is done.
then I found out that these, what do they call them,
Quality assurance.
quality insurance, the two people that are on my file that were quality insurance people ended up getting moved to the commission. Now,
So not
until
only
that
did they
time,
abuse Ralph at the WCB when when the WCB and Commission were one piece, when the government split them and separated the Appeals Commission from the board to make it look like that they're independent.
yeah,
As soon as Ralph goes to the commission, he runs into the very same people because they had to, people get
who've been
promoted.
torturing me for how many
And
years?
that was the catch. They promoted the racist asshole, the one that was talking about him. So what we discovered on the second piece with Ralph was, 1, Ralph is a drug trafficker. Did you not know that all Indians are criminals? And this caseworker is going on and on and on. And you'd not even believe it, but that was the second piece I found that Ralph and no one else had ever seen before.
Yeah.
It was entailed in phone records, and this lunatic actually wrote it in the file, what she was actually saying to these people. Anybody that knows anything about racism, just look racism up on the dictionary, or in the dictionary, and then read what she wrote. This is what she was verbally saying to people, and everybody's in shock, and no one ever did anything about it because nobody even knew it happened, right, until we bring the documents forward. And so at the end of the day, the only way to win this game at all is to bring out an outside third party, someone that Alberta Justice and the Alberta government cannot influence and cannot alter, cannot do anything. They have no involvement whatsoever, other than if you're there and you're involved, the police will be coming to talk to you. And then so the last hope that the injured workers have is what we're about to do. And if we're not successful,
we believe that this is
game
more
is
than
over.
just injured workers now.
Yeah.
This goes way,
Oh, it's well beyond.
way
Once we got
beyond this.
all them other entities.
This affects everybody in Alberta, and maybe even if this is going on all over Canada, then all Canadians. So,
But down the road, I'll give you the name of the professors. That's Grant McEwen. That
I have a list of questions just regarding like certain names and dates and things like that.
yeah, that need answers before you can work or to continue with your work.
To continue, yeah.
Yeah. Because we do have the answers. It's just a matter of taking the time to look it up.
Well, and that's why I'm not going to ask you on tape. I'll ask you, I'll write them down for you on another piece of paper, and then in your own time you can.
I will get you the answers
Grab
to
it.
your questions. And just so anybody listens to this, there will be nothing that anyone can ask me that I can't prove. And I want to clarify, when I say two of everything, I mean two of everything. And the reason I forgot to explain why it has to be this way. I did say that everything has to be linked together, but the reason there needs to be two or more, it's called aiding and abetting. If you can prove aiding and abetting, there is only one word that comes after that once you're proven that it's happening. That this is an organized crime, and or this is a conspiracy to commit a crime, but a crime has now been proven to have been committed, and it'll be up to the MPs to
it is
determine
no longer a
who's all
conspiracy.
involved. But to get them to do the proper investigation, we had to produce two of everything. So there's nothing that we talk about. So either Ralph and I have a match, or Ralph and Peter have a match, or Peter and I have the match. But we have two of everything on every subject,
Yeah.
on every target. Everything's all linked together. So it's just a matter of present this to the MPs coming up in 2018, and in turn, the ball will be in their court.
Yeah.
And
then
we'll
from
see what
there
they have
on,
to say.
Like if it goes forward, good. If it doesn't, then we've done everything that we possibly can.
Yeah, we will not be
Then what
pursuing
we'll
this any
do-
further.
What we will do then is just put it all out
It's over.
on the web,
Yeah.
and just let it go on the website.
Yeah.
And see what people will do with it from
Because
there.
at the end of the day, nobody can touch us. You can't sue me for something I don't have. I have nothing. So what are you going to sue me for?
Yeah.
And as I said
Well, plus,
before,
if
the
they
only way
sue
to
us-
stop the case is they'd have to kill us.
Well,
And,
they would, if they sue us,
that's it.
then the case goes forward, because then
And they would never sue because
Yeah.
why would they bother? The whole idea of this game is just to wait you out,
till you die.
and you will die.
Yeah.
And that's our own government doing this to people.
But this isn't just us. This has happened to previous. See, and where we've gotten, how we've gotten here.
Well, thousands of
We've
people.
had so much help from so many people.
Yeah.
But
Like I say-
it was a learning curve. But with all these people that we learned from, we couldn't bring them into this fold, only because of nobody being able to control their anger, the frustration, and then having to look after their file first.
Yeah.
This has been a real
We all
problem.
insisted on this selfish bullshit, and that's why we won't include anybody, and that's why we shut the doors, because I was sick
But
of
this is
listening
going
to
to,
it.
they'll be able to come in right after us and fix their problems.
If the police do their job,
Yep.
and if an investigation is concluded, then people can use that to better their cases,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and we will be finished. We
We
did
have
prove
done,
the case.
we will have done
right?
what we were supposed to do in this
Yeah.
lifetime, I believe.
So what we're saying in one sense is every working man, woman, and child needs to pay attention to this case, but what we're also saying is we're not allowing anyone into this case to interfere with it any further and delay it any further. Nothing will interfere with this case anymore.
Yeah.
I'm too sick, everybody's too
We've
sick to
collected
keep playing
everything
this
that we
game, and
need.
this game ends soon. And if I die before I get this work done, there will be no case. There will be no submission. There'll be nothing, and the workers will be left with nothing. And that will be the end of it. So we have to do this. And this is why nothing else matters other than getting this file number from the military police because they're honest, and if they give us the file number, that means that we gave them something. And there it is. We will get a fair and honest investigation. Now, whether or not they recognize it as a crime, we're about to find out.
And maybe politically they're going to try to cover it up or whatever,
Nobody-
but everybody will know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
And the reason Ralph knows, and we'll tell you why we know, why everyone will know what happened if there is no investigation and no prosecution. Because we have the military police and the federal crown on tape. We tape everything.
And they know it.
They made deals with us. They knew I was taping when the deals were made. And so we have deals. Go ahead and break the deal and see what happens. See what the citizens of this country will do when we tell you the story, and then we tell them what the deal was, and then watch them break it and see if they put up with it. They won't. That's one thing the citizens will not do, is allow the police services to play this game.
Well, the military themselves won't do it. They won't break
They'll
this
never
one
play the
because of
game.
my dad. They won't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing we believe is going to give us something that we've never had, and that is simply, and this is all we've ever asked for, and make sure you're very clear, Brielle, whenever you talk about this or write about it or however you want to do with this, is that we didn't ask for any money ever. We never have. All we've ever asked for was a fair and honest investigation. That's it.
Yeah.
And we all have expertise. We all have skill sets, and some of us some rare skill sets. We don't need anybody's help to find a job. You know, we have lots of work, and we had lots of work, no question about it. All we had to do is have the physical ability to go do it. And that's why we were so upset and so stunned and blown away when the very people that are mandated to give you this assistance and get you back to work were doing the complete opposite. And so why am I so special to get targeted for death? You know, because that's the only outcome when you treat people like this, is they will
That's
suffer
because we
extreme,
stood.
and then they will die.
See, whereas other
Right.
people, we've been targeted more than most people because we made a stand.
Yeah.
And knowing that we were going to get punished for doing it, it didn't stop us.
And see, you yourself, you were young, and whether you remember this or not, it is well documented because I went after him for what he did.
The MLA or whatever at the
Yeah.
legislature there?
Yeah, he wasn't just anybody at the time, no. He
No.
was actually the Justice Minister of Alberta, and his name was Dave Hancock. And so
Yeah.
for your tape's purpose, and what we're talking about right now, is Brielle had gone on a field trip with her class to the Alberta legislature. Upon arrival, the teachers lined all the kids up in a nice row side by side. And then the Minister of Justice at the time, Dave Hancock, he came in and shook each child's hand, and how are you today, and blah, blah, blah. And the teacher would tell them, this child is, we'll just say Mary Brown, this child is John Henwig, and down the line they were coming. But a phenomena occurs when he gets to you,
Yeah.
because he reaches out and he shakes your hand, and before the teacher can say who you are, he makes reference that I already know who you are, and shakes your hand.
I remember him saying that I know your dad.
Yeah.
That's what I remember.
Which explains that he knows you,
Yeah.
right? He knows who you are. Yeah. And so the only reason, and I want this to be clear, that for anybody that hears this, because Ralph's family was surveilled, and I've always believed that my kids were too.
Oh,
Right.
they were.
And,
They were.
it's true. And that one incident proves that it's true, because there is only one way in God's green earth that Dave Hancock, the Alberta Justice
know who
Minister at
you
the
are.
time, would know
By
who
name.
you are by name, unless he saw surveillance of you
Pictures. Because they do pictures
hooking
too.
up with me. Yeah, pictures and surveillance. And why would he know you so quickly out of all the people in the world that he may or may not know? It's because we were up his ass. He's the Minister of Justice. Who do you think we were trying to talk to at the time to give us justice? We didn't realize what a corrupt person he was, and that he himself was participating in a scheme against us. But all I'm saying to you is, I attacked him thereafter for traumatizing my child, and for attacking my child, you spineless coward. You refused to speak to me, the man that you're going to try and kill, but you had the balls to go speak to my daughter at the time? You know, that's insane what you did.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't allow it to stop, right? Or
And-
Allow it to continue.
to stand.
Yeah.
I did write him letters, and I did do a lot of things in relation, and that's another reason why I would never stop. I will die trying to get this submission completed.
There's certain things that
And-
keep
and that's
happening
it.
that keeps us going. You know, I mean, when my dad, you know, steps in there and you know, like he looks me in the eye and he says, "I want this to go forward. I want this to finish." He says.
And now he's older, he says simply, "I'd like my money back." He's entitled to it, but Ralph can't.
It's not even so much the money now as
Well,
the
it's
fact
the
that
principle as well, but
Yeah,
the
but-
money still has to be given back.
yeah, but his principle is that, you know, this racism thing there. I mean, he
Yeah, he got
Anthony
very
had,
upset once he read that stuff that we
yeah,
found.
Anthony
Yeah.
has a conversation with
native.
him.
It is disgusting, and I will, Ralph, if you want to turn around. This one's no, don't move. I got you. I'm going to read you something, and this is dated May 1996, and this is one of the witnesses outside the WCB who happened to be speaking to Ralph's caseworker, the racist one, and she wrote this note after the fact that, like, she used to work for a company Ralph was involved in, which was involved with WCB. And so I'm going to read you the letter, and it's very brief and short, and our interview will be soon over.
Okay.
But I'm not going to mention the lady's name,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
We will leave that part out because this is a piece of evidence going to be used in the case. But I don't think it will hurt for you to hear what she has to say about what she witnessed in relation to what I'm saying and what we're saying about the institutional and systemic racism that the Teed family encountered, right? And then she says, "Okay, my name is blah blah. I am writing this to whom it may concern regarding my conversation with blah blah, case manager at the WCB of Edmonton, who is handling Mr. Ralph Teed's claim. I am not sure on the exact date I had this conversation with blah blah, but it stood out in my mind because of what was said. We were talking about Ralph going to the rehab center for treatment, and you could tell by the tone of her voice that she did not like dealing with this claim whatsoever. Plus other conversations I had had with this said person, I could tell by what was being said and her tone of voice that she did not like dealing with natives, nor Ralph on this claim. On this occasion, she was telling me that she did not want to make waves with Ralph, as he is a native, and if he complains, she'll go to Natives Affairs. Up until this time, I had never met Ralph. I had spoken to him on the phone many times, but I was completely unaware that he was native. I asked the caseworker at this point if they had a lot of problems with natives, and she said yes, and Ralph does seem like the type who would use the avenue of Indian Affairs and complaint. And then the woman goes on to conclude that I was quite surprised by her attending, her attitude, I should say. I was quite surprised by her attitude towards natives and individuals in general. And so, when you take the document I find at the WCB, where the woman she's talking about in this note is actually spewing this racist garbage, this is one witness to it. And you can hear that she was very put out by the way she heard the WCB caseworker, Ralph's caseworker at the time, speaking about natives.
And the reason
Right?
why you know...
That's why we say that this is systemic or institutional racism, because the caseworker had a quality assurance advisor instructing her. And remember what we said, not just the quality assurance advisor, but the caseworker in '94 are working for WCB. But when Ralph's case is moved to the Appeals Commission level, the highest level of the WCB at the time, who did you run into first? He happens to run into the same people because they got promoted.
Yeah.
Right? And so, at first, Ralph's case was railroaded right off the bat, and then Ralph brought it to the attention of his advocate, Kevin Becker at the time, that these people were already on his file and already railroaded him years earlier. And it's absolutely
And they're still
sickening
railroading me.
that now they get to come up here to the highest level of appeal and railroad me again. And so that began the end of Ralph's last appeal.
Yeah.
What occurs right before summer of 2007 is Ralph's advocate files to have all of these people recused from Ralph's file and never touch it again, right? So that took a few months to get it all done, but it was actually done, which also it means that it was an admission that this was actually happened. They wouldn't have recused themselves if they didn't believe that the evidence proved that they did violate Mr. Teed's rights. And the reason they recused themselves so quick and easy wasn't discovered until I found the file. Because they knew that they were racist towards Mr. Teed and other natives, but they also knew that it had never been brought up, so Mr. Teed hasn't found the file yet. That's why they were so quick to recuse. Because if an investigation were to open up, they knew that the racist stuff was in the file and somebody might find it. So let's all just quickly recuse. We don't raise an argument. And Mr. Teed,
we don't believe that they totally recused themselves because...
No, because Ralph ends up getting wiped out anyway.
Yeah, they would be on the file helping whoever was going to do it to adjudicate the file.
But once again, you see, everything stems from WCB. But what makes our case so powerful is what everybody else did once they found out what the WCB did do.
Yeah.
And then that's what really shows the corruption, greed, deceit, dishonesty, and just the repulsive nature of how these people went about it. They look you in the eye at the same time they know that you could die and somebody in your family, and they don't give a shit. As long as they get their bonus money and they get their pensions. And that's one last point I'd like to bring up. It's not just government ministers we're talking here, and it's not just the police and these different entities we're talking here. I'm talking civil servants. It doesn't matter that the PC's changed to the NDP government in Alberta. The civil servants are still the same. So all the dirty crap that they were involved in while they were working for the PCs, they're on their own now at first. So they've been abusing, and we can prove this, and we're going to prove it to the MPs, that civil servants have been refusing, and they did it with the NDP, they did it with the PCs. They're refusing to give the ministers access to what we're submitting. They're redirecting it. Some of it goes to WCB, some of it goes straight in the garbage can, and we found that others have moved between officers.
They're hoping that
but the people that are supposed to be reading it and being aware, the ministers and their staff, and in many instances, the civil service will be shown to be interfering. Now, why would they risk everything? Because they participated in things while the PCs were in power that they cannot let anybody know about. So they're using the powers of their offices right now to further abuse you by making sure the new ministers, being in the NDP and so on, making sure that they don't become aware of things. So in some instances the ministers are aware, and a lot of instances the ministers themselves have no idea what the heck you're talking about if you were ever to confront them. Because why? Because the civil servants, they have a lot to lose. They have their entire pensions. They accepted bonus money under false pretense, and they want their pension.
And we believe this is part of the reason why we're not getting help from the NDP, because these are also union members.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, I mean, they're trying to protect union members.
And let's not kid ourselves. Rachel Notley's husband is an executive for a union.
But let's not kid ourselves also.
Is.
The union members themselves, it's just the unions are protecting. The membership they're not protecting because they're going through, I know many people are unionized and they're not getting the help. They're under the same gauntlet we are.
But remember what we said earlier, Peter is still a union member. And Peter had a meeting with an executive. And it was clear. Under this corrupt process, the contracts are not going to be as healthy as they used to be.
Yeah.
Which also means that everybody working there has to take a major cut in pay, or you're not going to be working.
This has happened before.
And the local workers called their bluff. We tried to tell everybody in 2004 when we called it the Meat Market Exchange. They're taking away all the rights of the existing workers, and they've set a structure in place that all the new workers coming in to replace us will not have any rights either. And that's how they control the game.
But there is a problem that has arisen. It's the quality of the work being done. See, now Canadians, most of these guys, they're being paid, some pretty good wages because they're well trained, they do the job, they work hard, and production was always up. Always going up in Canada. Now all of a sudden you have all these new people coming in. They work differently, and that's not different than, that's not holding anything against anybody else, but they're expected all of a sudden to work like Canadians and to do it specifically like Canadians. got to remember, it's taken many generations for us to get to where we're thinking that we got to be at work all the time, and whereas these other people have not had this. So what you're finding is the quality of work that's being done out there isn't
Well,
the
you're
same
basically
quality.
getting paid for, or you're getting what you pay for.
Yeah.
Where you used to pay one guy $60 or $70 an hour because he's a full tradesman and he's a master in his field, and he is there for a very good reason. They're firing him, and they're making 3 executives out of one job. So they got 3 different guys handling the same job now, and they need that many because these people do not carry the qualifications. But the point of the whole story is, you lose your job.
Yep.
Instantly. And just so the people that listen to this tape are clear about what happens in Alberta when you lose your work, you will lose everything else too, because right now, as of the making of this tape, and today is, I think it was, November 19th, it's almost 7 p.m. and we're still 7:30 almost. But what I want to conclude with is our next door neighbor. There's 2 holiday trailers parked there in between the 2 houses. And each one of those holiday trailers has a family. A mother, father with 3 kids in one, a mother, father with 5 kids in the other one. And the reason that these trailers are here is these people lost. As we said, you will all go to work for a cut wage. This is all part of the scam because employers will make more money, right? And this is all part of the scam in Alberta. And if you don't, we will replace you with a foreign worker. And that's exactly what they've done. And so in 2004, I told everybody that they were creating a meat market exchange. And the government was successful in telling everybody that I was a mental patient not taking my medication. As it turns out, I did try to get medication, and for the clarity of your tape, after 6 months of seeing 10 psychiatrists twice a week, they came to the conclusion that it would be unethical and unprofessional to medicate the messenger. And so they refused to assist my family with any medication at all. To help calm me down, to help me with pain, to help me in any way, shape, or form. That was the excuse they refused. But for 6 months, twice a week, 10 psychiatrists at a time interviewed me. One at a time with the other 9 behind the glass. They each took turns. And until all 10 were done. But this went on for twice a week for 6 months. And all we did, your mom and I, is we wanted them to give me some medication to calm me down and help me control pain. You know, at the time we had no idea what we were dealing with.
This was in Leduc, was it?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it turned out to be a pilot project put up by the local mental health
I
office.
warned your dad.
Right?
I warned them that they would use the mental health crap on us.
And that's why when I went there seeking help, and they asked me if myself and my family, if I would allow us to be used as a pilot project. Well, of course I do, right? Because not only do I get investigated, but so does my whole family. And I get the results. And we were hoping that we'd all be taken care of. No one in my family was given any medication.
Yeah.
Because they didn't feel that my family needed medication. What they felt is if we were ever able to get resolved in our dealings with the government, that in itself would heal our family. And that's what we were told. Is to the reason
I still believe that to be
medicate
true.
the messenger.
Even today, that would help heal everybody.
Yeah. And it is true that once people learn and understand, like I say, we've attempted to tell the public, we've attempted to show the public over the years, and we've run into major problems. The bottom line is, though, in this case, no one's going to be able to stop what we're doing. We will get our fair and impartial investigation, and there will be an outcome.
You know,
We can't predict it, but we think that the outcome is going to be much different than anything Albertans have ever seen before, because the investigation is actually going to be fair.
Yeah. And you know, like, we're not myself, I don't care if anybody goes to jail. That's not my concern. You know, these people have done some nasty things. We all have our karma. And when I look at some of the karma that these people hold, it just makes me feel terrible, because we're going to see this karma in our future ripening upon these people and the sufferings that they are going to gain, because they will make so many other people suffer.
Yeah.
This is how I believe things work. I mean, I don't care if you call it sin, karma, whatever, black, white. When you do negative comes upon you. But the reason why a lot of people are doing this is the perception that it's okay. I'm working right now for this corporation, and I'm not breaking no laws. I'm told to do what I have to do, and I'm doing it. And they don't care that, I mean, everybody now is being taught to perceive everybody as like a number. And what goes on in that person's life, anything else that happens, that's none of your business. This is it.
Yeah.
And this one specific thing. You know, and you see this is a learning curve. I learned this through the WCB. So even though I get a lot of pain and sufferance for all these things, I'm trying to use that for my advantage in the sense of understanding how all this works. Why are we in such a flux in this whole world? And, you know, we could say there's real simple things that could fix it, which is really not true. The fact of the matter is everybody has a different mind. Everybody has free will. But in order for this to work, is that we have to be able to get together and talk. In the system that we have right now, we don't have communication. It's all hidden. Everything's done behind the doors. Therefore, they say it has to be done that way. And that's how they're getting away with it. And the person on top, they're the uno. They can do everything and anything they want and change laws. Well, meanwhile, the people, what are they getting out of all this? Nothing.
Yeah.
So the only way I perceive it is that we go for regional representation. I think Alberta would be a good place to start.
Yeah.
Now, and then see how the Longhouse works in Alberta. If we can change all this kind of corruption, this craziness, and turn it right around, you know.
He's dreaming.
I am.
And I tell him that, and we get into major arguments about this. And so just
But
so
you
we can
always
all end
have
our,
to have
So we
something
can
in
end
place.
this
If you're
fairly
going
and
to
honestly.
complain about something, you've got to have some idea what you would like to see it come out of.
Yeah.
And I do believe in predictions, and this has all been predicted. So,
it's not going to happen in our life.
no, but I can
It
set
most
it up for
certainly will
your future, my grandchildren's future, everybody else's future. If we have to live through this pain and sufferance, and maybe if this is what everybody else that hears this tape, if they're going through the same thing, and they have to live through all this pain and sufferance, we're already lived it, so why don't we just accept this is what we got, but let's do something. Let's do
Well,
something to
the
change it.
UN, which is the United Nations, make it very clear. I believe it's Article 10. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's Article 10. But there is an article written there that if you do not get resolved, you as a human citizen have the right to rebel. And you do have a right to fight against
But they'll
your
kill
own
you.
government. They will
Yeah.
kill
If you do it with the sword.
but they're going to kill you anyway.
But if you're a
And if
rainbow
you're in that
warrior,
position,
you do it with the pen and any other way but the sword.
but if
Oh.
it doesn't work,
That's what your dad,
if the pen and the
Peter,
sword and such doesn't
that's
work,
what we are. We're rainbow warriors. That's
Then
what the
you
name
have
of
the
it
right
is
to
at this
rebel.
time.
that's how far you can take this if you had to.
Yeah.
You know, if you had the resources and stuff. And one thing that's going to change in Alberta for sure is these people that are coming from these third world countries, they don't put up with this kind of shit. If it's discovered that they're being railroaded, they will burn houses down, they'll burn buildings, and they will do nasty
Well,
things
they
just like
used
they
to-
used to do back home. And so, anyway, the point of the story is, we were,
I believe that they
Victim.
will let the law, if the law works, they'll use it. They'll try to use it to make sure that the law works, because even in their own countries, that's all they ever wanted was laws that work. But to come over here and then all to find out, you know, when things go wrong, as long as everything's going right, everything, the perception is everything's good. But when
we
it
already
starts
know it's
falling
not going
apart,
right.
yeah.
We've already got so many families that are coming into the country saying that they've been bold-faced lied to, and this is corroborated by anybody that lives in Edmonton. Within the last 2 years, there must have been 8 or and maybe even a dozen stories of these refugees coming to Canada and screaming bloody murder because they didn't get exactly. They wanted a house big enough to fit all 14 of them. The mom and dad plus 14 kids, and mom's pregnant again. Their society believes in this many children, and they just keep birthing them out because the whole idea is eventually you'll overtake the whole area you're in through population, and then you get to be the boss. And that's exactly how they're playing this game. But what's disgusting is we that live here that have been homeless before, what their attitudes make me sick. I hate refugees and I hate immigrants when they talk this bullshit, because it makes me feel like walking up there and whacking them all. Very simply, but who the hell do you think you are? We have Canadian citizens that are homeless or on the street. Look how I've suffered and been tortured all this time. And you think you can walk in here and start screaming and hollering at us that we didn't give you anything that you wanted? What they're being told is they will come here and get a house, an apartment or a house big enough to fit their families. Well, it's not possible at all, ever. Look at Sweden, look at Norway, look at Britain, look at Germany. Look at any one of them and you will not find anybody in any society, not the Irish or anyone, that have houses that are fitting 14 frickin' kids. Even 10 kids. It doesn't exist. The only place this kind of garbage exists is in the Middle East, where they don't care about birth control and places like that. And that's an absolute unquestionable fact.
The whole thing about the Middle East, though, is that their families all live together. So if you have 14 kids, you got grandma, you got uncles,
but this is all
they
part
all
of
live
the
together.
scam of what I'm saying is happening in Canada, and specifically Alberta. It's the people that are coming here being lied to as well. Before they even get here, they're already being lied to by the very same people who are about to railroad them. And there's very little that they can do once they do realize it. And then fighting back. And they will also realize
they're going to run into our story.
Then they run into, you're not going to win. There is only one way to win, and that's to get around the Constitution. The Constitution says every crime that's committed must be dealt within the boundaries of the province where the crime was committed. In this case, we are taking it outside, and we're not taking it to Supreme Court either, where it's going to cost us a fortune. We're taking it to an organization that is mandated by law.
And we'll let them take it to the Supreme
to
Court.
investigate what happened to us and come to a fair and honest conclusion, eh? And so it's a once-in-a-lifetime deal. We're about to do something no injured workers have ever done before. No injured workers have ever made it as far as we have. And the reason we're made it as far as we have is because we didn't follow the same old path. We wrote our own story, so to speak, and we recorded everything.
Well, when we hit a
And
wall,
so
we bounce
eliminate-
off it. We don't try to go through it over and over and over again. We might try it, a
Well, we
different
eliminate
angle.
the bullshit of the
Yeah.
Supreme Court saying that you can't hear a case over 6 years old. Well, this case is 20 and 30 years old, and we're going to hear the frickin' thing because it's all caught on tape. People can't remember what they said, not a problem. We'll play the tape for them in open court to refresh their memory. Now you could hear yourself. Now, what were you doing? Are you going to protect the people? Of course they're not. If you're sitting in there with the MPs and they're asking you questions, and now the MPs, if you know the MPs have the recordings, how are you going to respond? Are you going to tell the truth, or are you going to bury yourself? And now you're by yourself. You got your pension to protect.
The only way that they
We
could
fully believe that if the
fully
investigation goes
change
forward,
that then is they would
care.
have to be all interviewed by the government, and the government would tell them how to do it.
Yeah.
The interview. But I don't believe that can happen. There's just too much here to cover up anymore.
And now in the future, if you ever do this again, you should conduct the interviews separately. Is what you should do. And then that would eliminate overlap. Right?
Oh,
And also,
I'm
I think this worked.
And honestly, I was going to say, absolutely.
It's not too bad, but the way the story isn't quite out in a nice straight line, so to speak.
Yeah, we did jump around a little bit here.
Yeah.
I was going to say one of the things that they teach us in anthropology is that when you ask a question, you might not get the answer you expect.
Exactly.
But someone is still answering your question. You have absolutely answered my question in the back and forth, in
The
Right.
conversations
In the
that were happening.
conversations
See, the
that
only
are
way
happening.
I believe that the interview could be done was with the two of us.
I
don't have enough memory to pull all off, and you just help me to bring it out when you're talking.
And I was going to say I absolutely might do separately and then together, but I absolutely believe that some of the best answers, some of the things that I'm definitely going to be writing about, have come from when you're overlapping and you're, I guess, riffing off of one another, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to be a
Because
problem for me.
everybody has something in common, and the one commonality is we're all going to die prematurely because our own government set the stage for us to
I don't
die
look at it as being
prematurely.
premature. I believe it's we all have karma. But what makes it a little easier, I'm going to die younger, is the fact that I've done something.
Yeah.
And see, I believe in rebirth. And so
And see, Ralph goes to the monastery and he meditates. Me, I'm pissed right off at what they did to me. And if I had a license to kill them, I would. And I don't care who listens to that. I'm not psychotic or anything. I've actually made these statements on the stand, standing beside a judge under oath, when asked. It did happen in Leduc Court. And in turn, I'm mad. I'm very upset. And I'm not going to let any one of these bastards get away with what they did to my family. Right? And that's my motive.
I believe
he
everybody
meditates all the time, and he finds solace in meditating and following the path of compassion, and maybe maybe not love everybody, but be compassionate to your fellow humans and such. Me, I want to gut them all, and I'm not even kidding. If I had opportunity,
You're a little different.
We have so many differences, but so many things that are all the same.
And Peter, he comes from a country that's close to where Bosnia was, and the killing, raping, and murder that was witnessed by those people at that time, which inevitably led to the destruction of Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
It's disappeared after that time, but it's just the fact that this is where he comes from, and so ever since he's a kid, he's been railroaded by his own government right up to the point of rape, murder, and pillaging their own people. Right? And people running for their lives, family being executed right in front of you. These are all common things that people in that time witnessed. And so, Peter is like me, and he's also like Ralph. And it's strange that way of how this crew came together like that because of these three attitudes. Peter's a 50-50, I call him. He agrees with Ralph half of it, but he's coming with me on the other half. If we arm up and go after him, he's coming with me. And we'll die together as brother in arms.
But you won't do that.
No, we're not going to do that.
No.
Because we don't have to, because Mr. Teed, Herb Teed, Ralph's dad,
Found an avenue.
he gave us a door. We knocked on that door, and for clarity of purpose, and one last time, after many hours of pre-screen interviews, the captain agreed, and we have a deal. And the deal is solid. And he himself, it wasn't me that did anything, he did it. He's the one that set up the interview with the federal crown prosecutor who would be
Because he
prosecuting.
believed what your dad was saying. Unbelievable, that part, but he believed it.
Yep. And so at the end of the day, all I have to do coming up here, all we have to do coming up here, is prove what was said. It has to be proven, and that includes Notley, Lukasik, and the cops. Every story, every word that you've heard on
the
this tape,
doctors,
plus more.
lawyers.
There's a lot more to the story because we can't get into all the detail, which would have been priceless for people that are hearing your report, to actually hear the final details of how did we come to these conclusions and actually what evidence do you have. It would frickin' blow people away to get their hands on this stuff, because everybody that reads it will understand now, and I'm not kidding. Every injured worker that hears about this story, once we hand it over to the MPs, will understand how they got screwed. Because our three cases encompass all cases. We even have death and suicide in our cases. People that we know that we felt were killed by withholding medical care, and people that killed themselves because they couldn't handle the pain, and others like us. It's a crude word, but they just bleed you out. And that's what happened to Luis. They let him suffer until there was nothing left to suffer. Right?
You see, Luis had nobody. When he came up here, and he had his own little family. And he was the one that was looking after everything. When he went down, I mean, who could he go to? So he started coming to the injured workers groups and stuff, but this was making him sick. And then I ran into him, and we got a rapport going, and every time we would see each other, we'd sit and talk. And
he was right, though.
Yeah.
Luis Bachman, years later, his wife Anna, gave me access to Luis's file, all of it. And when I went through it, I did find, as I usually do, I found out the truth of what was the culmination of all of Luis's work. And it all boils down to one sentence.
yeah,
It took us a few years to figure out how this sentence, like how to understand the sentence,
how it's all going to fit
and
into
how
everything.
it fits into everything. but we have accomplished that now, and that's why we're moving forward. And what Louis said, and I quote, "The true crime is the way the legislation is written and enforced." Period. Unquote. And now
It's called cheesy law.
Louis's death really affected us all.
That's holes everywhere.
Well, and I'm
yeah.
going to cut you off. I personally remember finding out about when Louise died because I remember Ralph calling you.
Yeah.
And then I can count the number of times I've seen you cry on both hands, today included.
Right.
And that was one of those days.
Oh yeah.
And
We were crying. Both of us were
Yeah.
Because the
freaking
man
couldn't stop.
actually knew
Yeah.
what he was talking about, but that he ran into the same wall. Is how to prove it when the people that you're trying to prove it to are the ones that are doing it to you, and they're in control of any investigations. So we took all of this, and this is why we had to find an avenue to get outside the boundaries of the province. We don't have the money to go to the Supreme Court. It'll cost you at minimum $250,000 just to run intervenor status on an existing case. If you want to be the one to file the case, you need $1 million plus.
Yeah.
And no injured worker has access to this kind of money, nor would anybody ever borrow you that kind of money. The only way that injured workers are going to get any resolved in this province, and this is workers in general, is for this investigation upcoming to be successful.
This is the true David and Goliath story.
Yeah.
I mean,
They
this is
have
beyond
everything, they
David and
control
Goliath.
everything.
We're talking.
But what's going to get us to the end and why we're going to win is because our stories remain the same all these years, and all we've done is refine the evidence, and once the proper authority reviews it and sees it, the game is over. And they will deal with it however they want.
Yeah.
And what I'm predicting is what happens is people pay attention to what's happening in Quebec. They have the Charbonneau Commission.
Yeah.
They're dealing with corruption in their province. There's 7 mayors in a row are doing jail time, plus all their staff from Montreal. They're all doing jail time. They're being forced to give back millions and millions of dollars that they stole, and so on and so forth. And as I said to Ralph before he came in, real quick, like, one of the mayors, first he goes to jail for 10 years, and then they're going to let him out, and you're going to give us that $14 million. But if you don't, and I think they're going to give him 12 months to hand it all over. But if you don't, then you're going back to jail for 15 more years, and then we'll ask you again. And this is how, this is punishment coming finally. But it's all in Quebec. And then Alberta is such a perfect place. Crime doesn't exist here. And on the audio tape, if you ever heard it, of me and the Assistant Commissioner of the RCMP, that's one statement that he does make, that no one can tell me that crime doesn't happen in Alberta. Even though the evidence that we're presenting shows that people are getting away with crime, he says that you can't. You're not supposed to be able to.
Yeah,
right?
well.
But when we have a corrupt government, and to find out, that our lives were destroyed simply for a business model, so they could sell investments easier by proving that the workers are controlled, and the workers will not be getting anything special. And all these people ran here to Alberta. I mean, when they said Alberta was open for business, they weren't kidding. But what they were actually telling people, the real truth was, the workers' situation is not a problem. You will not have to pay exorbitant fees, because they've already cut wages in half, right? And now we're getting tradespeople for being cheap, and they're cutting them again. And then those that don't want to play, have a nice day. We'll just bring in foreign workers and replace your ass. And that's exactly, we predicted it, and that's exactly how it went down. And so we'll see what happens coming up. But I appreciate the conversation. This was fun to do this, and I'm glad.
I appreciate having you both here.
I'm glad it helped for your school project.
Absolutely.
And in the future, if there is ever any follow-up on this, we will be in a position to actually hand over audio itself and documents itself.
Yeah.
And let the people, when I say that we
I still got 2 years of schooling left, so there's lots of opportunity.
What we would like to do is build a complete website to put out everything that we've gathered.
An archive.
Yeah, we would like to do it, but the purpose is that we're in a position that no one has ever been before, and we're not going to allow anything to jeopardize
Until the
effort and the
investigation's
work.
done.
Yeah, so the MPs will be calling the shots.
Yeah.
What they say we can talk about publicly, then we can talk publicly and go into detail about things. But you know yourself, if you're asking someone to investigate, the very last thing you would want to do is undermine your own investigation, like
Exactly.
Ralph Klein, our premier, did. And because, well, a matter was Well, the matter was before the court at one time, Ralph Klein, he decided to go do a bunch of radio interviews, and he even did some TV interviews and in-person interviews.
Smooched himself.
And he wiped out the entire case, because when they came back that Monday morning, they were all called into court, and the case is over instantly because the premier breached. And because the case was still under investigation and ongoing, you can't talk about anything or you'll pooch your own case, and that's what the premier did.
Yeah.
And just for clarity of purpose, anybody else that listens to your tape that does actually look stuff up and prove it, whether it's true or not, or they like to do that kind of thing, tell me the name of the premier of Canada. There is only one. It was almost held in contempt of court by the Supreme Court of Canada. And it will come back to Ralph Klein. He is the only premier in Canadian history. And it's because the Supreme Court ruled and he spit in their face. And we won't get into all the details of the case unless somebody wants to know what it is, and I'll let them know. And they can continue to look it up. But the fact does remain that he is the only premier. And so if this premier of Alberta is willing to spit in the face of the Supreme Court, and they threatened him, and it is in writing, that they threatened to hold him in contempt, and he was going to be put in jail if he didn't comply. And it came down to the last day of the 12 months. That's when Klein did what the Supreme Court had ordered. But he did not do anything for 363 days. He waited till the last day, or 364 days I should say, because he waited till the last day to actually do what he was ordered to do, and that's what stopped it from him being arrested. But nobody could believe it at the time that an actual sitting premier is about to be arrested and taken before the Supreme Court in contempt of court. You were breaking the law in Alberta. The Supreme Court caught you and told you to make correction, and you spit in their face. Now, I'm just saying this because it's true. People can look it up themselves. It's the Alberta government against the provincial court judges. It's their case. The Klein interrupted and interfered with and broke a bunch of rules, and he just eyeballed the whole thing.
You got trouble.
So the provincial court judges won everything. Everything they asked for, and plus they now have an entity that's worth millions and millions, and anybody messes with them again, they will run into some serious problems. And that's what we attempted by starting an injured workers group, but we didn't have resources, and you can't get past the fact, and Dunford again was right. People that are injured and suffering, they cannot join in anything. Unless it involves them getting what they need, they can't mentally allow themselves to join anything else. The whole topic has to be about them. And as you can see and hear by the tape that we just made, that in fact, the only reason our crew is here is because each of us had to come to the understanding that your case is no goddamn more important than mine is. And that's how it's going to go. We either go together or we're not going. But no case is better. The only reason Ralph's goes down first is because his starts in 85. He's the base to our arguments as to why Mr. Herb Teed, why his money was stolen. And then Peter's case goes in second because Peter was 91. And it's what he found out, right? And then now, I come along from 94 and I run cleanup. And it's simply because I met Ralph, and at the time I met Ralph, I never did record anybody. Ralph had already been recording people for 10 years before I met him. And that's why Ralph had the hockey bags when he came that first day. Some had paperwork in them, but others were raked full of audio tapes that he had made over the years with all kinds of people. And so it took years for me to listen to all this stuff.
He listened to everything.
I know he did.
Yeah, but you understand then, and this is, this is why your dad was taken away. One, I can't do anything. I can't function. I can't take you to the park as much as I'd like. I can't offer you anything except unconditional love. But other than that,
I was going to say,
I can't offer you nothing. And for a father growing up like that, it's sad, right? Nobody likes to do that. But anyway, at the end of the day, we are going to win this game because our doctors are refusing to let us die. We should have been dead already, and as everybody is saying now, and they say it unknowing. Like, for example, what I mean by that, and I will get off this tape in a second, but my pharmacist the other day, just in discussion, she says that there's a reason that you're here. There has to be a reason, and I just knowing you and your family and what's happened to your family, I actually believe. I never did believe this before, she said, and this is a licensed pharmacist telling me this stuff. But she didn't believe in miracles or anything like that before, and she believes it now.
Yeah.
Because you should have been dead 8 times ago, maybe 10 times ago, but you're still here. Your body is ravaged, it's busted up real bad. You've got major diseases and everything, and each and every one of them could kill you, more or less combining them all, and yet you're still here. Why? And that's what she said. It matches up to what Cujo said. If you have, his monk.
I know, I'm just laughing because I know you're trying, but I can feel him cringing.
Yeah. I never say it quite right, but...
Cujo? No, it's okay.
But he does say that you're not allowed to die with this information. You are a seer, you guys see things that no one else can see. And it's our job and our destiny to make sure that everybody sees what we see. And no matter how hard we have to try, no matter what we have to go through, we have to show everybody what we've found. And then by them understanding, change will occur.
Yeah.
Because once the people know how bad
there's no other way to put this. This is the story of the bottom feeder clan. I mean, we've got Mr. Nobody. We've got the mirror, the guy that can go into 2 different places. So we'll call him the what's the word I used for
Magic.
Yeah, the magical one. And then we've got here, somebody that shouldn't even be here.
Yeah, we're supposed to be dead, so I get called the miracle case now.
Yeah. So we got nobody.
But we all have, like Ralph said, what keeps us, or what is in common with us all, is all of our families were destroyed.
See, we were called bottom feeders. That's why I call us the bottom feeder clan. I mean, it's not just us. I mean, it's everybody else in our groups, our circumstance, our setting. Native people, just poor people.
Anybody that has the mistake of getting injured, you will fall victim
If you're just
to
a
it.
laborer, poor person, just working along every day, whatever, you're a bottom feeder.
And for clarity of purpose too, some of the people who get pounded into the ground even worse than we do are these foreign workers they're bringing in.
Yeah.
Because these people come from, we'll just say a war-torn country, a third world country, call it whatever you want, but they don't keep records like we do over here. But the whole system over here works off of records. So since you come from somewhere, we don't even care where, but you came from somewhere outside of Canada to work in Canada. Unless you can produce the paperwork required, you will get nothing. You will get no assistance or anything. And we know this for a fact because one person we know comes from Germany, that we studied this case extensively. As a matter of fact, this person gave me hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of calling cards. So I could call specific people in Germany and speak to them directly to verify his story. And one of the people was a priest, right? Back in World War II, the priests of Germany were the ones that collected your medical records and any records related to you. It was the police of Germany that dug holes in the ground and put monuments on top so to give the Germans the idea, or the Nazis, give them the idea that this is a dead body in here. But when in fact, what was buried in there was all the records that they tried to keep. And so this worker that came to us for assistance, that gave us the money for the cards, I spoke to the priest that ran the church. He was still alive, right, which was a miracle in and of itself.
Yeah.
He didn't speak a lick English, but one of the girls that worked at his church, she'd been studying English as a second language. So her and I did all the talking, and she talked to him about everything I wanted to know. And he actually remembers the family. Some of the family still to this day come to that church. So he knows who the family is.
And this is an old claim.
He knows what happened to them and
So
everything.
what we're saying is like it never changed.
Yeah.
So the worker, he got shafted hardcore in Canada here until we were able to access those records that were buried in a grave. And that just blew me away how that all went. We are accessing records that are buried in a grave, for crying out loud, in a graveyard in a cemetery, and we're using those records to help this guy, right? But that's all I'm saying. Without records in how many of these countries, Middle Eastern countries, I mean, we just blew the whole country up and flattened every city, so where would there be a record of any kind?
Yeah.
But if these people come here, which they are, and they're being allowed in as immigrants and refugees, if they get injured, Well, if we don't stand a chance with records, they definitely don't stand a chance without them.
Yeah.
That's why I say they took away our rights, and by these people coming into this environment, they don't even realize they don't have any rights. They think they do, and they're all smiling, but wait till you get injured.
We're going to end here.
We're done.
Yes, you look like you're getting pretty sore.
Yeah, I am. I got to get medicated, and so I'm going to hit stop on
I
this.
can